1781, Chengshank. Chapter 1767 Becoming a God. Zhang Fan, who was still hesitating, did not notice the change in Xuanyuanhong's expression. Admittedly, he was indeed somewhat startled by the sudden revelation of the mountain and sea Tao annihilation's truth. But due to his nature, and with the ultimate treasure Huan Zhen by his side, to truly make him stay in this Fang Kun place forever, he was truly unwilling. After all, he wasn't like Fishing Old Man Sr., who seemed capable of fishing there for a lifetime. Let me think about it again, let me think about it again. Zhang Fan was a bit indecisive for a moment. Xuanyuanhong did not urge him, but he seemed to have already foreseen Zhang Fan's final decision. In this world, time seemed to stand still. Fishing Old Man and the newly captured stone slab, one large and one small figure, always sat and fished. Xuanyuanhong, on the other hand, spent most of his time intimately with his Tao companion, occasionally coming over to check on Zhang Fan. As for the other seniors Xuanyuanhong mentioned, Zhang Fan did not discover them. Presumably, they did not wish to be disturbed. There were also living beings here, but their lifespans were extremely long, with no worry of aging until the mountain and sea's destruction. And this world also seemed to have life, its scale growing day by day. Resources would never run out. In a sense, it could indeed be called a bliss. There should be no fault to find. But 10 years passed, 100 years passed, and Zhang Fan still had not adapted to this place. Even though he lived a carefree life every day, he always felt constrained. 800 years later, Zhang Fan finally couldn't bear it anymore. He came before Xuanyuanhong, his expression solemn. "It seems you've made up your mind," Xuanyuanhong said with emotion, having long anticipated his arrival. Zhang Fan nodded. "You must think carefully. Once you leave here, there will be no chance to return," Xuanyuanhong said very solemnly. Zhang Fan could not truly understand the meaning of his words. 800 years of confinement, a sudden escape, his heart was now like a wild horse unbridled, eager to run free. "My mind is made up. I will never regret it." "All right," Xuanyuanhong sighed softly. "When do you depart?" he asked again. "Now," Zhang Fan said in a deep voice. "I'm afraid if I stay a few more days, my will might become disheartened again, and I won't have this resolve," he explained. "Very well, then I shall see you off for the last time. The road ahead is arduous, and I cannot help you much." Accompanied by Xuanyuanhong, Zhang Fan walked out of that illusory sky. Feeling the boundless Tao annihilation pressure once again, a trace of instinctive fear surged in Zhang Fan's heart. But at the same time, he also felt a great sense of freedom, like a fish leaping in the vast sea or a bird soaring in the boundless sky. He just wanted to let out a wild roar, to vent the comfort in his heart. Xuanyuanhong simply allowed Zhang Fan to express himself. Finally, at the time of parting, he handed over a jade pendant. "If you encounter a fatal crisis, this jade pendant can shield you from one calamity. However, it can only withstand one time. From now on, where you go depends entirely on your own opportunity." Zhang Fan thanked him profusely and bid farewell to Xuanyuanhong. He crossed the Tao annihilation, treading waves in the mountain and sea. And the place where he came from, along with Xuanyuanhong, suddenly disappeared into the mountain and sea. Within that world, Xuanyuanhong, Fishing Old Man, the Eternal Guest, and 3 other figures all looked up in unison towards the figure of Huan Zhen, and the world of the transformation of God's slaughter where Li Fan's true body resided. Their gaze swept over, and although they did not pinpoint the exact location, they locked onto the approximate area. Zhang Fan had been in this world for thousands of years, and his true background was still not completely clear. But they had a general idea. Actually, Brother Zhang is not a bad person. It's a pity, but there will definitely not be a second Zhang Fan coming here. After all, it is the true false great Tao. It's not shameful for it to break through the blockade and descend suddenly. Fortunately, I have improved the defenses of this world, so no more pawns will enter. Unless that person comes in person. Senior Pozhenzi has worked hard, Xuanyuanhong said. Pozhenzi's gaze, however, never left the direction of the transformation of God's slaughter. After a long while, he said with a sense of loss, "Once, it seems I fought alongside him. It's a pity, but now I've lost my courage." With that, a wine gourd appeared in his hand, and he drank it all in one gulp. "Once, we believed that the continued existence of the mountain and sea was due to the great Tao. Not just you, but everyone present, who among us didn't strive to save the world. But in reality, reincarnation is the true destiny of this place. Those who try to break reincarnation are the anomalies. Pozhenzi, have you still not grasped this? A voice came, and Pozhenzi merely snorted coldly, taking a few more gulps. Wang Jisoo, you talk too much. Knowing is one thing, accepting it is another. Furthermore, when we jointly created this refuge, there was no agreement that we couldn't go back on our word and leave. The atmosphere suddenly grew cold. Haha, he's hooked. A cheer from Fishing Old Man broke the stalemate. After playing with the hooked fish for a while, he carelessly tossed it back into the mountain and sea fishing ground. Fishing Old Man stopped fishing and stood up, gathering with his old friends. Everyone's gaze instantly focused on him. The unchanging is for a moment. The changing is eternal. Our peaceful dwelling here is merely waiting for the right opportunity. If possible, we act. If not, then we continue to rest. Why quarrel? Fishing Old Man said indifferently. You should know that we are not the only ones hiding in the mountain and sea, waiting for a true change. Fishing Old Man's gaze seemed to penetrate the undercurrents of the mountain and sea fishing ground, reaching all corners of the mountain and sea. All of our old bones combined probably aren't as strong as one other person, he chuckled self-deprecatingly. Xuanyuan Hong repeatedly said, Fishing Old Man Sr. is too modest. Although all saints are equal except for true God, you all were once bodies that became gods. If it truly came to a fight, you wouldn't truly fear anyone. Becoming a god. These two words seemed to touch some ancient memories of those present, and they fell into silence once again. At the beginning of time, in the primordial era, the saints endlessly contended. What they sought was to seize the creation of the mountain and sea, to obtain the sacred opportunity of becoming a god. They lost their hearts for this. Just like us back then. No amount of persuasion is useful. Only by truly becoming a god oneself and experiencing everything will one truly comprehend. Except for you, young Xuanyuan, you are an exception. Fishing Old Man slowly walked to a pleasing spot in the world and sat down again. He grabbed the stone slab, which was completely stunned from overhearing the shocking secret, and pulled it beside him. And began fishing again. Xuanyuan Hong smiled bitterly, compared to you seniors, I merely have self-awareness. After countless reincarnations, the change of truth and falsehood finally has another variable. Let it be. Anyway, we cannot resist. It's just that this time, I think there might truly be something different about it. After a discussion, the saints dispersed, hiding themselves in the world. It's just a bit of a pity for Brother Zhang. He truly is a genuine person. I wonder if there will be a chance to meet again in the future, Profound Heaven King sighed. Zhang Fan, who had fled far away, naturally knew nothing of the various happenings in this world. He had gradually recovered from the initial excitement of leaving. He would never admit it verbally, but in reality, he already felt some regret. The dangers and infinitude of the Tao annihilation were truly far beyond his expectations. Seeing it was one thing, experiencing it firsthand was another. Just finding another potential place to settle down had almost exhausted all of Zhang Fan's strength. If the Tao annihilation within the mountain and sea is already like this, what about the illusory realm outside the mountain and sea? Zhang Fan felt even more horrified in his heart. But with no turning back, Zhang Fan could no longer find his way back and could only brace himself and continue forward. Fortunately, Huan Zhen still has over 90 uses left. Just as Zhang Fan was feeling fortunate about this, his expression suddenly changed dramatically. Someone else with Huan Zhen has appeared nearby. I can't use it temporarily. What does this mean? The shock Zhang Fan felt at this moment was even greater than when he suddenly witnessed the truth of the mountain and sea Tao annihilation. From birth until now, possessing the true false great Tao, he had always believed himself to be the legendary protagonist, the fated one. Therefore, even if his golden finger was discovered, he could always remain safe and sound. He never expected to encounter an existence with the same template as himself, not long after leaving the beginner village. What exactly is going on? Zhang Fan felt both startled and angry in his heart. But before he could even think, the surrounding possibilities had already plunged into a sea of fire. Under the scorching flames, Zhang Fan was forced to reveal himself. Fellow Taoist, please wait. Zhang Fan still wanted to discuss with the other party what exactly was going on with their similar situations. However, the other person carrying Huan Zhen had no intention of communicating with him. The offensive not only did not slow down but intensified. The surrounding flames possessed the power to incinerate the heavens and annihilate the earth. Even the Tao annihilation tides were momentarily suppressed by the intensity of the fire. Zhang Fan tried to escape, but he could not break through the blockade of the fierce flames no matter what. He actually wants to kill me. Zhang Fan finally realized, and at the brink of life and death, a cold glint flashed in his eyes. In that case, don't blame me. Having stayed in the protective world for many years, without worries of life and death, his cultivation and combat skills had become somewhat lax. But after all, there were too many powerful beings around him. The occasional guidance Zhang Fan received was an opportunity that others would find unattainable in a lifetime. The willing one who takes the bait. Zhang Fan narrowed his eyes, his gaze seemingly piercing through the boundless sea of fire to find the person hidden behind the scenes. Using his hand as a rod, he lightly cast it out. The rod fell, and the fish was caught. As if without any reason, Lin Fan, who had unleashed this boundless sea of fire, was caught in Zhang Fan's hand. His face was filled with shock. He instinctively wanted to struggle, but his entire body seemed to be bound by heavy fishing lines, completely unable to move. With the enemy instantly captured, Zhang Fan hesitated when it came to actually killing him. After all, he had never killed anyone in his life. Moreover, the other party's life and destiny were very similar to his own, and even their chi was subtly the same. There must be some connection between us, Zhang Fan mused inwardly. Just as he was hesitating, a gust of wind seemed to blow before him. Lin Fan, the hooked one, was incinerated as if by a raging fire, turning into ashes inch by inch. Zhang Fan's heart immediately jolted. Before he could react, a streak of black fire had already struck him directly between the eyebrows. Am I actually going to perish here? Scenes from the past flashed through Zhang Fan's mind. There was regret in his heart, and a sense of loss. And also anger towards this sneak attacker. Just as the black fire was about to consume Zhang Fan's divine soul, a green light ignited, blocking all harm. Brother Xuanyuan. Zhang Fan reacted instantly. What saved his life was precisely the jade pendant Xuanyuan Hong had given him before their farewell. He had thought that with Huan Zhen in hand, he would never need this treasure in his life. He didn't expect that his journey of 1,000 miles had only just begun, and it had already been triggered. Knowing that he would never have a second chance, Zhang Fan hardened his resolve. Life and death separation. The moment the words fell, Zhang Fan seemed to split into two. One was filled with death chi, like a zombie that had slept for thousands of years. The other was vibrant with life, like a 10,000-year-old green tree. The incarnation of death fiercely slashed his own head. At the same time as his head was severed, Lin Fan, not far away, also let out a miserable shriek. His head, for some unknown reason, was also severed. It was not just the body that was affected. Even the divine soul and consciousness were separated by this connecting slash. Falling into Zhang Fan's hands. Die. Zhang Fan no longer hesitated. The death chi incarnation pointed a finger at the center of his fallen head's forehead. His body shattered inch by inch, taking the great enemy Lin Fan with him. The disappearance of the death incarnation did not affect Zhang Fan's actual survival. The endless green vitality of eternal life nourished him, allowing him to recover from his injuries quickly. The psychological impact of this battle on him far surpassed that on his body and divine soul. Yet, there were gains. Huan Zhen could be activated again, and he was temporarily out of danger. And, I can feel that the other party's Huan Zhen power has been absorbed by me. Zhang Fan closed his eyes, sensing the growth of a peculiar energy within his body. Fishing Old Man Sr. mentioned more than once that the so-called Huan Zhen is actually the change of truth and falsehood, the true-false great Tao. I also privately asked Brother Xuanyuan. This Tao seems to be something only I can comprehend and cultivate. Even a genius like him cannot glimpse a single bit of it. Now, a second one has appeared. And, far more than that. After killing Lin Fan, Zhang Fan also intercepted some of the other party's memories. Before encountering him, Lin Fan had already met 3 other individuals who also possessed Huan Zhen. Lin Fan had fought his way through, but unexpectedly, he still fell into his hands. This person's auxiliary cultivation is the Tao of scorching silence fire. Common stuff. Zhang Fan frowned slightly, then relaxed. From the other party's memories, he learned that this Tao was already among the highest tier in the mountain and sea, something ordinary cultivators would strive for their entire lives but fail to obtain. I already vaguely know that Fishing Old Man Sr.'s identity might not be simple. But I still didn't expect that it might be even more extraordinary than I imagined. Zhang Fan, who was slow to realize, finally understood what Xuanyuan Hong meant when he said he could never go back. But Zhang Fan only regretted for a moment, and soon his will became firm again. Compared to that eternal ease, it's still this kind of slaughter, plunder. More suitable for me. Even though there was no substantial gain this time, Zhang Fan felt an almost uncontrollable excitement deep within his heart. Let me see how many people like me are still in this vast mountain and sea. I'll kill as many as I encounter. Until I find the true mastermind. Zhang Fan, even though he still didn't understand, was very likely in the midst of a huge conspiracy. He wanted to break the situation, he wanted revenge. 1782. Kill the Lord. Chapter 1768. Slaying the Lord of Fate. Having grand ambitions is good, but things don't always go as smoothly as planned. Those who could rise from obscurity while wielding Huan Zhen were all extraordinary individuals. Zhang Fan was able to successfully kill Lin Fan entirely due to the advantage of his divine abilities. But in a life-and-death struggle, divine abilities are only one determining factor, not the whole. Since one encounter where the opponent unexpectedly escaped, the unique techniques he learned from the protected world spread like wildfire throughout the mountain and sea. Now, everyone knew he possessed powerful divine abilities like Wish of the Hooked, Life and Death Separation, and Heavenly Luck Devourer. They would guard against him from afar, and he often faced encirclement by multiple people. In contrast, Zhang Fan often knew nothing about other cultivators who carried Huan Zhen. This put him at a great disadvantage. Damn it, I should have been more ruthless back then. Thinking of this, Zhang Fan felt deep regret. However, he couldn't be entirely blamed. Who would have thought that the person named Zhou Fan was 9/10 similar to him? Even when extremely close, they could vaguely sense each other's inner thoughts. They were practically like one person. When the opponent's divine soul was almost annihilated, Zhang Fan also felt as if he were experiencing it himself. Terrified, he simultaneously felt a pang of pity, pity for myself. Zhang Fan's hard nature trembled, and his extermination movement involuntarily stopped. Zhou Fan, seizing the moment he was dazed, broke free and fled at light speed. You just wait, this grudge will be repaid. The opponent's voice, full of resentment, still echoed clearly in his ears. At that time, Zhang Fan would never have imagined how much trouble this disheveled escapee would bring him later. Fortunately, I still have a trump card, Reincarnation Annihilation, that I've never used. Perhaps it can serve as a last-ditch effort. However, no matter how strong it is, it can't withstand such a war of attrition. I can only hide for now. But hiding like this isn't a long-term solution. I'll be discovered by others sooner or later. Methods of transformation and concealment might work for other cultivators, but for those who also possess Huan Zhen, they are largely ineffective. Heaven's Chosen Son is a collective term for all cultivators who carry Huan Zhen. It's unknown who first coined the term, but with the true false great Tao within them, they can indeed be called Heaven's Chosen Sons. Everyone was satisfied, so they all grew accustomed to this appellation. The Heaven's Chosen Sons, the moment they encounter each other, even from a great distance, will instantly detect one another due to the similarity of Huan Zhen and their divine souls. What made Zhang Fan even more depressed was that Zhou Fan, through some unknown method, seemed to have directly revealed his identity as Zhang Fan to all other Heaven's Chosen Sons. When any Heaven's Chosen Son encountered him, even if they had never met or heard of Zhang Fan before, all of Zhang Fan's information would spontaneously surface in their minds after a moment. And this public recognition seemed to be shared among everyone and constantly updated. Initially, Zhang Fan didn't realize this. In a deathmatch, Wish of the Hooked and Life and Death Separation, divine abilities were successively countered by the opponent, gradually putting him at a disadvantage. He then relied on using Heavenly Luck Devourer for the first time to turn the tide and kill the opponent. Zhang Fan was certain that he had destroyed all traces thoroughly, clearing all surrounding possibilities, and there were no bystanders. However, when he later encountered other Heaven's Chosen Sons, they were still wary of Heavenly Luck Devourer. They carried defiling objects to corrupt their own luck, thereby countering Zhang Fan's divine ability. This caused Zhang Fan to suffer a great loss, and his injuries have not yet recovered. Currently, he can only temporarily retreat to an ordinary mortal guo due in a common possibility, absorbing the luck of living beings to slowly recover. Public recognition, it must be Zhou Fan's doing. This recognition only exists within the Heaven's Chosen Son group and is ineffective on other cultivators. Zhang Fan had already confirmed this through extensive soul searching. It should be that he utilized some similar characteristic of ours. This characteristic might be the fundamental reason we all carry Huan Zhen. It might even be related to the ultimate conspiracy behind everything. After realizing this, Zhang Fan was startled to find that he still understood too little about himself. Where did Huan Zhen come from? And where did I come from? Zhang Fan forgot his past ambitions and the dangers lurking outside. He merely immersed himself inwardly, seeking the answer to this question. Seeing the hard nature clearly, observing oneself internally. For others, it might be an extremely difficult task. But for Zhang Fan, for some unknown reason, it was exceptionally easy. Zhang Fan vaguely sensed that it might be related to the years he lived in the protected world. There, heaven and earth grew naturally without limit, and all beings had no worries of aging. There should be the great Tao of longevity secretly protecting it. And I lived there for a long time, rarely encountering conflict or slaughter. It should be some kind of great Tao power, subtly transforming and nurturing the hard nature of all things. Although not much time had actually passed since he left, Zhang Fan, having successively experienced one life and death struggle after another, had already completed his transformation. Many things he had taken for granted in the past, when he recalled them afterwards, he realized were not right. His longing for the novice village only lingered in his mind for an instant. Zhang Fan's thoughts were immersed, as if he were directly facing his own divine soul. It was pure and translucent, as if it gathered all the wonders of the world. Yet, it also seemed to have no essential difference from the countless Zhangsheng in the mountain and sea. Where is the connection? Zhang Fan tried to examine himself from the perspective of an outsider. In an instant, he seemed to split into two. One returned to his own body, while the other floated out of his body, observing from a distance. Slowly, Zhang Fan's heart gained some enlightenment. All, Fan, all, Zhang Fans. All return to you. All, all, Mize. All return to me. As he inexplicably spoke, a transparent white light seemed to float out from the observing him. It returned to the sitting, Zhang Fan's body. At this moment, Zhang Fan seemed to escape from the fate of a heaven's chosen son, gaining the ability to observe himself from an outsider's perspective. A fine line, or countless fine lines representing fate, extended from his body, connecting to countless different corners of the mountain and sea. And beyond the mountain and sea, in that unknowable place, all the fine lines converged into one. Boom! The glimpse lasted only an instant before Zhang Fan was dragged back by the strong gravitational pull from his main body. He spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. Rashly moving his origin divine soul, the severity of this injury far exceeded Zhang Fan's estimation. He almost failed to maintain his transcendence realm, nearly falling to an unnamed realm. Fortunately, everything was worth it. In that fleeting glimpse, Zhang Fan not only saw a way to avoid the divine ability of known to all but also saw the hidden hand manipulating all heaven's chosen sons. It's a pity, I only know how to break known to all but I don't know how to use this divine ability. Otherwise, if I directly revealed that hidden place to everyone, we could all charge up together. Zhang Fan's expression constantly changed. He, however, did not know that his thoughts had suddenly frozen at this moment. A blurry figure, in this instant, crossed endless time and space, descending before him. It was Huan Zhen. As the mastermind of Li Fan's plan, everything projected onto the divine bodies was under his control. All actions, even thoughts, could not escape his perception. Therefore, the moment Zhang Fan subtly showed signs of losing control, he acted. Huan Zhen had not expected such a quick discovery of the connection between the various divine bodies. The power that caused Zhang Fan to separate from himself seemed to still linger in the air. Huan Zhen gazed for a moment, then immediately understood. Slay the Lord of Fate. Then he looked towards the location of the various perfected divine guests. Without causing any ripples, the group of perfected divine guests and the protected worlds they had created silently vanished from the mountain and sea ahead of schedule. Then Huan Zhen looked at the frozen Zhang Fan, but for a moment, he fell into hesitation. Although this divine transformation seemed to be out of control, who could guarantee that this was not also within the expected variables? Just as Huan Zhen hesitated, Li Fan's faint voice suddenly appeared. Since it is a variable, it has meaning to exist. Let's see how far he can go. The voice echoed continuously, and Huan Zhen's figure had already vanished back. If everyone charged up together and captured the mastermind, wouldn't that be wonderful? Zhang Fan's thoughts resumed flowing. From beginning to end, he had not noticed the arrival of Huan Zhen nor his narrow escape from death. After slightly recovering from his injuries, Zhang Fan began to reflect on the divine ability he had just comprehended, which could avoid the influence of known to all. That feeling should originate from the butcher who occasionally processed the fish caught by the mountains and seas angler. The mountains and seas angler did not release all the fish he caught. In very rare cases, he would find a satisfactory collection piece and keep it by his side to play with. Just like that stone slab. Before carrying it, he would often hand it over to a slovenly butcher for processing. Only after the butcher's clean cut would the angler confidently put away his collection. So obvious, not an ordinary cultivator. Yet, before this, I had never noticed him, instinctively ignoring him. This kind of strength, Zhang Fan secretly felt shocked. Once the image of the butcher appeared in his mind, the feeling for that Tao became increasingly strong. The clean and decisive flash of the blade constantly flickered in Zhang Fan's mind. Slowly, he too, followed suit, striking a blow in the air. As if a single strand of hair fell in response. And then thousands upon thousands, like snowflakes filling the sky, drifted down. Zhang Fan's body simultaneously showed countless bloodstains, as the price for severing the heaven's chosen son's connection. But Zhang Fan was not surprised but delighted, an uncontrollable smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. Blade of Fate Slaying, what a good name. Severing shackles, severing all fate. With one strike, all bonds vanished. The effect of known to all slowly disappeared. The dark cloud that had long hovered over Zhang Fan's head seemed to finally disperse. An unprecedented sense of security enveloped his heart. Zhang Fan fell into a deep sleep. When he woke up, he was still alive and well, and his injuries had fully recovered. If I have the chance, I must go back and thank those seniors properly. Zhang Fan mused to himself. He clearly knew that his ability to escape the destined fate of a heaven's chosen son was not because he was special. Rather, it was entirely due to the subtle care and protection from the mountains and seas angler and other powerful beings. I just don't know what realm they are. Could it be that they are all what are called mountain and sea saints? While pondering, Zhang Fan continued to sever all remaining connections. When only a single fine line remained, the blade of fate slaying hesitated to fall. The moment the blade light began to rise, Zhang Fan's heart was filled with an unspeakable great fear. As if when the thread broke, it would be the moment of his own demise. After much hesitation, Zhang Fan ultimately chose to trust his intuition and did not force the strike. It's not time yet. Perhaps only when I attain the saint realm can this blade truly fall. Zhang Fan enlightened. Speaking of which, could it really be that I'm extraordinarily gifted? This divine ability, Blade of Fate Slaying, is profound and mysterious. I actually comprehended it very smoothly, and it's becoming easier to use. And my other divine abilities? Zhang Fan was utterly baffled, ultimately attributing it to the secret cultivation by the powerful beings. He would never have imagined that all the perfected divine guests, including the mountains and seas angler, had now been completely erased by Huan Zhen. All the great Taos temporarily became ownerless. As the only one in the mountain and sea currently connected to these great Taos, he could be said to have inherited all the legacy of the perfected divine guests. Naturally, his comprehension was exceptionally smooth. Zhang Fan, however, didn't think so much. Now, his mind was entirely focused on revenge against Zhou Fan. Now, it's my turn to hide in the dark. I hope you're not easily caught by me. Zhang Fan's eyes narrowed slightly, a cold glint flashing. Zhou Fan's divine ability, known to all, had truly made him suffer terribly. If this grudge was not repaid, would he even be a person? Soon, Zhang Fan left the mortal nation where he had been healing and secretly searched for the opponent's whereabouts. But Zhou Fan was indeed cautious. Relying on the mutual perception of Huan Zhen, Zhang Fan had already cleared nearly 100 heaven's chosen sons, yet he still hadn't found his trace. And the drastic reduction in the number of heaven's chosen sons in a short period had also made everyone realize something was wrong. They all stopped being ostentatious and temporarily went into hiding. This caused Zhang Fan's journey of revenge to suffer another setback. The turbulent mountain and sea surprisingly fell into a strange calm. After painstakingly finding another heaven's chosen son and killing and absorbing him, Zhang Fan's heart suddenly jolted. Strange, the number that disappeared in a short time is too large. Something doesn't add up. Could it be that, besides me, there are others hunting heaven's chosen sons? His heart suddenly skipped a beat, as if confirming this guess. Zhang Fan's expression involuntarily turned serious. Who could it be? Zhang Fan was not surprised by this. After all, the number of heaven's chosen sons appearing in a short time was indeed a bit too many. They attacked each other, disregarding other powerhouses in the mountain and sea. Furthermore, all heaven's chosen sons carried the treasure, Huan Zhen, so it was inevitable that others would covet it. Those with the strength and motive should be the various mountain and sea saints. Once upon a time, Zhang Fan had wanted to cross Dao annihilation to the so-called other shore, the Holy Dynasty, to admire the demeanor of the saints. Now, he wanted to avoid them at all costs. I am strong enough now. With divine abilities in hand, exterminating transcendence cultivators is like slaughtering chickens and dogs. Yet, I am not strong enough. Even without truly fighting a saint, I know in my heart. At this moment, I am definitely not an opponent for a saint realm. A breakthrough is hopeless in the short term. To protect myself, I still have to rely on the change of truth and falsehood. After this period of slaughter, the true false great Tao that Zhang Fan had absorbed and accumulated was already quite considerable. 1783, Qi Junjun. Chapter 1769 Abandoning Huan Zhen. Huan Zhen. The more Zhang Fan comprehended, the more uncomfortable he felt. He was both amazed by the endless profundities of the true false great Tao and slightly sour because it didn't truly belong to him. It was like a peerless beauty standing before him, yet he could only feast his eyes. Amidst his sense of loss, Zhang Fan's heart suddenly stirred. However, it's still unknown who the true false great Tao truly belongs to. Even if the mastermind views us as pawns, they have, after all, given us the opportunity to come into contact with Huan Zhen. There's no wall that can't be dug through. Zhang Fan quickly regained his spirits and fully immersed himself in comprehending the change of truth and falsehood. Having half-stepped out of his shackles, he had already realized that, in addition to directly plundering by killing each other, his own comprehension could also strengthen his grasp of the change of truth and falsehood. In fact, what he comprehended himself might be more reliable than what was taken from other destined children. With this belief, Zhang Fan entered a long period of secluded cultivation. Let the outside world be filled with treacherous, bloody storms, he remained unmoving, comprehending the Tao. Time flew by, and the pawns Li Fan had scattered across mountain and sea gradually died off in silent droves. From the initial magnificent scene covering the entire mountain and sea to only a few struggling survivors now. The speed of the change was truly somewhat unexpected. At its root, it was because Huan Zhen, of a specific time and place could not truly be called open black lens bracket Huan Zhen close black lens bracket. Without the power to reset the entire mountain and sea in an instant, there were countless strong individuals in mountain and sea, too many ways to deal with Huan Zhen. What seemed like a slight numerical difference was, in fact, a fundamental distinction. When Zhang Fan awoke from his slumber, he immediately realized this point. He felt ashamed of his past arrogance and ignorance. It's truly a case of a newborn calf not fearing a tiger. I thought with the benefit of Huan Zhen, I could go anywhere in mountain and sea. In reality, a saint realm cultivator could probably break through Huan Zhen's protection and directly suppress me. And how many saints are there in mountain and sea? If they were to join forces. With a thought, Zhang Fan silently recited the 7 words, true is false when false is true. It was as if he was viewing the entire mountain and sea from the perspective of open black lens bracket Huan Zhen close black lens bracket. He roughly perceived the true false great Tao drifting within mountain and sea. I only closed myself off for a while, and the numbers have dwindled so much. No, there are still large numbers gathered in a certain place. Zhang Fan's expression changed. He didn't dare to truly look, only sensed silently. While he was startled and alarmed, a hint of pity also arose in his heart. In the past, countless destined children were together. What a lively scene that was. He had even thought of gathering everyone to expose the mastermind. Now it seems, having the true false great Tao is indeed a supreme treasure and protection. But possessing a treasure invites crime, and the risks faced are truly terrifying. With the saints eyeing them covetously, ordinary destined children truly have no good way to escape. Thinking of this, the idea that had emerged in Zhang Fan during this secluded cultivation became even stronger. That was, he wanted to abandon the true false great Tao and instead comprehend other Tao paths that truly belonged to him. This decision, even in Zhang Fan's own eyes, was extremely inconceivable. A heaven-reaching great Tao was within his grasp. Instead of seizing it for cultivation, he would abandon the fundamental and pursue the trivial, cultivating other lesser Tao paths. It was truly unwise, but Zhang Fan knew he had a compelling reason to do so. Because open black lens bracket Huan Zhen close black lens bracket ultimately doesn't belong to me. Zhang Fan sighed deeply again. During his long period of secluded cultivation, he repeatedly tried to grasp it more tightly. But the distance between the true-false great Tao and him did not lessen because of this. Nor did it widen. Instead, it remained elusive, as if it had been set up long ago. After countless failures, Zhang Fan finally decided to give up. He who knows himself is enlightened, he who knows himself is wise. Giving up one great mountain doesn't mean losing all mountains in the world. Perhaps I can find the one that truly belongs to me, Zhang Fan tried hard to convince himself. Although he had formally decided to give up comprehending the true-false great Tao, it did not prevent Zhang Fan from continuing to regard open black lens bracket Huan Zhen close black lens bracket as a handy tool. Perhaps a Huan Zhen of a specific time and place cannot completely turn the tide, but releasing it at a critical moment of life and death will always cause some interference. Moreover, all saints believe that the destined children's greatest trump card is Huan Zhen. Perhaps this is my opportunity. Zhang Fan's eyes flickered. In a breath, a wooden fishing rod appeared in his hand. At the same time, a silver vortex emerged between his brows, and the slow sound of a sharpening blade seemed to echo in his ears. During his secluded cultivation, although he hadn't actively comprehended these Tao paths, they had, however, proactively attached themselves to him, and the connection between them and Zhang Fan had become invisibly closer. He felt as if he had returned to that place of refuge, living a comfortable life with the angler, Xuanyuan Hong, and others. He sought it bitterly, but could not obtain it. He planted a willow without intent, and it grew into shade on its own. This was also one of the important reasons for Zhang Fan's change in perspective. Zhang Fan was not a dull person, he had vaguely guessed the reason for these Tao's changes. It should be because of me that they perished. There wasn't much sorrow in his heart, just a hint of melancholy. However, Zhang Fan quickly cast all emotions aside and began to comprehend the Tao paths entwined with him. Except for the great Tao of longevity, which is not with me. All the others spontaneously gathered towards me. Life-severing, angling, array-breaking, forgetfulness, fortune, paper-folding. Zhang Fan did not find any of these mysterious great Taos obscure or difficult, he only felt an immense closeness and familiarity. Perhaps compared to the complete true-false great Tao, they are more than a notch weaker. But compared to the incomplete Huan Zhen, they are actually stronger. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Zhang Fan gritted his teeth and finally made his decision. In an instant, as if a persistent thought had been severed, Zhang Fan felt his entire being lighten. All the complex emotions he had previously felt towards Huan Zhen also vanished. Only a sense of calm remained, as if saying, if I gain it, it is my fortune, if I lose it, it is my destiny. If you are in my hand, I will treat you as a handy magic treasure. If you are gone, then I'll just consider the magic treasure broken. Zhang Fan smiled lightly. Although he had spent many years comprehending the change of truth and falsehood, he ultimately decided to switch his cultivation path. But this did not mean that his efforts all these years were in vain. Zhang Fan vaguely perceived that the change of truth and falsehood shared many similarities with the life-severing, angling, and other Tao paths entwined with him. Or rather, the relationship between the change of truth and falsehood and all Taos in mountain and sea is like this. It's like the foundation of mountain and sea. Comprehending the change of truth and falsehood, and then comprehending other Taos, can yield twice the result with half the effort. Conversely, if one has a complete grasp of other Taos in mountain and sea, then the change of truth and falsehood will naturally become more proficient. Zhang Fan pondered, and then resumed his secluded cultivation in the same spot. Originally, the various Tao paths on him were separate and independent. But as time passed, angling, life-severing, fortune, paper-folding, and so on, seemed to gradually show a tendency to merge. The change of truth and falsehood acted as their catalyst. This caused all these Tao paths, which originally belonged to the former divine guests of mountain and sea, to converge upon Zhang Fan. The fusion of various Taos, especially when they were all mountain and sea great paths, required an extremely long time, measured by the lifespan of mountain and sea. Zhang Fan seemed to have fallen into a deep slumber. And the fortune of mountain and sea also seemed to be subtly exerting its effect. Zhang Fan just sat there quietly, comprehending the Tao and cultivating. During the long passage of time, vast intentions continuously swept over from above. Yet they never discovered Zhang Fan's whereabouts. After an unknown amount of time, all of Zhang Fan's aura was completely restrained. It was as if he had vanished from mountain and sea. And the lifespan of mountain and sea was also nearing its end. Fortune could no longer protect the possibilities within it, and Tao annihilation devoured everything. However, the Tao annihilation that could swallow mountain and sea had no effect on Zhang Fan. Dark waves rolled, crashing and passing straight through him. It did not affect Zhang Fan in the slightest. However, sensing the anomaly around him, Zhang Fan finally slowly awoke. How long have I slept? Zhang Fan was a little surprised, but upon sensing his own realm, all other emotions vanished. I've become a saint just like that. Feeling his current state, Zhang Fan's expression was somewhat inexplicable. The endless mountain and sea he had seen in the past no longer appeared so vast and majestic in his vision. He could shoulder it, his body was its equal. Mountain and sea is nothing more than this. Such a thought couldn't help but arise in Zhang Fan's heart. Breaking through from transcendence to the saint realm should have been an earth-shattering event. Yet, it happened to Zhang Fan so silently. It was like water flowing into a channel, without any commotion. There wasn't even any fluctuation in his aura. He just became a saint. To be honest, Zhang Fan still felt a little disappointed. He hadn't personally experienced that thrilling moment of becoming a saint. Fortunately, I finally completed this step. Now, I have enough power. I no longer need to fear anyone in mountain and sea. Originally, Zhang Fan thought he would first go to the mastermind's location he had sensed and confront the master of open black lens bracket Huan Zhen close black lens bracket. But upon realizing the near extinction of the destined children and the true-false great Tao gathered not far away, he changed his mind. Someone must seek justice for you all. Let me, the one who survived, do it. Zhang Fan took a light step and walked towards the depths of mountain and sea. There, the saints were gathered. But all the attention of every saint in mountain and sea was focused on a single spot. They didn't even react to Zhang Fan's quiet arrival. Zhang Fan's gaze followed suit. A towering tree stood in the void realm. Countless figures hung upside down, like ripened fruits. The strong or weak true-false great Tao aura emanating from them undoubtedly revealed their identity. Destined children. Zhang Fan also saw many familiar faces among those countless figures. Among them was Zhou Fan, who had used the divine ability open black lens bracket known to all close black lens bracket and caused him great distress. However, that had been countless years ago, and Zhang Fan's resentment had long faded. There was no hatred, only deep sorrow for them, as they were also destined children. Although they still had Huan Zhen by their side, seemingly possessing the power to restart at any time. All the destined children were trapped in a powerful illusory dream. This was a web of restraint, jointly created by the saints of mountain and sea. It influenced and distorted the destined children's perceptions. The world they experienced was not the real world. The Huan Zhen they thought they activated had, in fact, not been activated. Are the saints trying to use the bodies of the destined children to comprehend the true-false great Tao? Zhang Fan initially thought so. But he quickly realized something was wrong. No one knew better than him how elusive the true-false great Tao was. Even with the help of the destined children's feelings and experiences, one could not hope to comprehend open black lens bracket truth and falsehood close black lens bracket in the slightest. Zhang Fan was certain that any attempt to comprehend open black lens bracket Huan Zhen close black lens bracket was doomed to be futile. Aside from the master of Huan Zhen, no one else in this world can truly comprehend or control true-false. So many years have passed. With the talent of the saints, it's impossible for them not to realize this. So they are. What happened next provided Zhang Fan with the answer. Mountain and sea entered its apocalypse. Tao annihilation raged and churned relentlessly. But the saints remained completely calm. From the tree laden with destined children, wisps of strange fluctuations gradually emanated. Zhang Fan was naturally all too familiar with them. Huan Zhen, he was startled. He saw a faint light and shadow surge past, and the mountain and sea, swallowed by Tao annihilation, actually returned and reappeared in the world. It was as if mountain and sea had been reset. However, the great tree with countless destined children hanging on it was still there. The saints were still there. The mountain and sea, which should have been destroyed, gained a hint of vitality again because of this reset. But what's the point of doing this? Zhang Fan was somewhat confused. To be alive is to have meaning. A voice came, and all the saints' gazes fell upon Zhang Fan. You are. Zhang Fan looked at the young man who appeared before him, his heart filled with vigilance. Chu Xinwei. The young man merely said a name faintly, then asked, have you come to avenge them? His motive was exposed, but Zhang Fan did not admit it. He merely snorted coldly, I am here to free them. Although Zhang Fan felt that with his current strength, he was enough to contend with the saints, he still felt a hint of danger from this young man. Therefore, he did not immediately act, but instead waited to see what would happen. For some reason, Chu Xinwei's words always gave him a strange sense of familiarity. To be free, Chu Xinwei smiled again. He repeated, to be alive has meaning. The freedom you speak of. Did they truly desire it? Sensing that he might not be able to win a verbal argument, Zhang Fan narrowed his eyes, whether they desire it or not, I decide. What, are you going to stop me? Facing the saints present, Zhang Fan's heart was fearless. He even felt a little excited. His life had been quite boring. Right after he started out, he was suppressed by powerful figures like the angler and could only obediently stay in the novice village. Later, when he finally managed to get out, although he experienced a brief period of intense fighting, most of his subsequent days were spent in hiding and secluded cultivation. From his actual sensory experience, the life he had lived hadn't even reached 100 years. It could be said to be quite uneventful. Now that he had finally achieved success in cultivation and had the opportunity to contend with the saints of mountain and sea, how could he miss it? This was also why he had to come here first. His heart stirred, and in his vision, sword light gradually appeared above the saints' heads. At this moment, a pale dot suddenly entered his field of vision. The life-severing sword light all dimmed. Zhang Fan was startled, but he already felt a hand on his shoulder. Let's talk nicely, no need to hurt feelings. After all, our goals are consistent. Although the other party didn't explicitly say it, Zhang Fan knew who the goal, in his words, referred to. The mastermind who created countless, destined children. 1784. True disappearance. Who are your excellency? The hand resting on his shoulder was extremely cold. Even his own vitality was affected and frozen by it. Even though Zhang Fan instantly used change of truth and falsehood to protect himself, he still completely failed to escape the loss of vitality. Although he had reached the saint realm, Zhang Fan had very rarely engaged in combat during his lifetime of cultivation. Therefore, in this first battle after becoming a saint, he suffered a slight disadvantage. Fortunately, although he did not achieve Tao through longevity, he benefited greatly from it. The warm power of longevity, like a gurgling stream in spring, resisted the complete onset of freezing. Zhang Fan's expression turned cold as he gradually recovered from the opponent's sneak attack, his gaze like a knife, instantly locking onto the target. Even if he didn't know the opponent's background or name, as long as they were within his perception, the life-slaying blade could fall. And it wasn't just one. A slender, jade-like hand appeared out of thin air, gently gripping the life-slaying blade. Then, like paper folding, the life-slaying blade transformed from 1 to 2, and 2 into 8. In just a breath's time, blades fell like rain, descending menacingly. Who are your excellency? Who are your excellency? Who are your excellency? It was both an inquiry and a challenge. An inquiry about the opponent's identity, and a challenge to the opponent's existence. His voice was like thunder, continuously echoing and striking down. He wanted to directly erase the opponent. Folding paper merged with life-slaying, and forgetfulness merged with truth and falsehood. The moment he saw that pale spot, Zhang Fan instinctively knew how powerful the opponent was. Therefore, at this moment, he unleashed all his divine abilities as a sign of respect. The pale spot grunted, and the hand pressing on Zhang Fan's shoulder disappeared. However, the light it emitted remained bright and stable as before, completely unaffected by Zhang Fan's various great Daos. Clearly, all divine abilities had accurately locked onto and hit the target, but for some unknown reason, they did not produce their intended effect. This feeling, protection from change of truth and falsehood. Zhang Fan was instantly surprised and suspicious. But a moment later, he realized the difference. It's not that he's unaffected, it's as if he's already experienced and endured these divine abilities countless times. He's already accustomed to all of this, so he receives them as if he doesn't. Zhang Fan vaguely felt that the pale spot in front of him might be even more unfathomable than he had imagined. So, after forcing it back, he did not rashly make another move. The pale light dissipated, revealing its true appearance. It was the image of an ordinary, thin middle-aged man. "I am Huan Zhen," the man said with a faint smile, cupping his hands. Huan Zhen. The moment these 3 words appeared in his mind, Zhang Fan felt that the true-false great Tao he had comprehended was subtly stirred. It was as if this thin man in front of him had some connection to Huan Zhen. Huan Zhen looked no different from a mortal, but just by standing there, he brought in subtle pressure upon Zhang Fan. Zhang Fan subtly retreated a little, feigning ignorance and saying, "I wonder what fellow Taoist Huan Zhen means by the person behind the scenes." Huan Zhen did not expose Zhang Fan's feigned ignorance, but directly stated, "The person behind the chaos in the Star Sea is naturally the master of the true-false great Tao. As for you, and them, they are merely clones created by him." Clone, clone. Zhang Fan was stunned at once. Clone, so that's how it is. Then he seemed to awaken from a dream, understanding everything. He felt somewhat relieved, yet also a little dazed. It was said that one cannot see the true face of Mount Lu because one is in the mountain. Zhang Fan had long vaguely glimpsed the possible existence behind the scenes, and then was even able to gradually break free from his predetermined fate, comprehend various mountain and sea extraordinary Tao principles, and attain the saint realm. But he had always instinctively believed that the true culprit behind the scenes was someone else. And he had subconsciously and instinctively ignored the possibility that he was a clone. Now, Zhang Fan was belatedly reacting. Perhaps it was due to the subtle influence of Fishing Old Man Sr. and Xuanyuan Hong and others. "It is precisely because I have always firmly believed that I am an independent individual, not someone else's clone, that I was perhaps able to successfully inherit the Tao principles of everyone and cultivate to become a saint. And if the thought of being someone else's clone had ever appeared in my mind, even for a fleeting moment, the path to becoming a saint would have been severed from then on." Zhang Fan, who had vaguely understood, couldn't help but feel a hint of relief. Fellow Taoist may already know that the mountain and sea is in endless reincarnation. Birth and destruction, endless reincarnation. The matter of truth and falsehood, originally illusory. However, in countless experiences, a scene like this is truly the first time. Huan Zhen said, pointing to the large tree standing in the void realm ahead. "And fortunately, because of this, we are fortunate enough to be able to observe the true-false great Tao up close." In Huan Zhen's words, there was a clear emotional fluctuation. Regarding the reincarnation of the mountain and sea, Zhang Fan only had a vague guess. He was not too surprised to receive confirmation from Huan Zhen's mouth at this moment. His greater focus was still on the true-false great Tao. So he asked, "Have you gained anything?" Huan Zhen smiled again. "If one cannot even see it, how can one gain anything? The true-false great Tao favors only one person. Even if all possible methods are exhausted, it cannot be touched, nor can it be comprehended. Although I had a premonition of this before, it wasn't until this time that I completely confirmed it and gave up." Then in the recent small-scale reset of the mountain and sea, why were you able to be preserved along with it? This was the only thing Zhang Fan couldn't figure out. Our continued existence is not due to our own power. It is due to the efforts of countless destined children before us. Huan Zhen did not hide it. Although we ourselves cannot comprehend or manipulate the change of truth and falsehood, we can influence and distort the thoughts of the destined children, causing them to willingly apply the power of truth and falsehood to us. Of course, in their dreams, they may not truly realize what they have done. Zhang Fan remained silent, looking again at the great tree formed by countless selves. Huan Zhen seemed to have seen through Zhang Fan's inner thoughts and suddenly proposed, "There is no harm in letting them be liberated. In fact, you can even do it yourself and end all of this." Zhang Fan's heart stirred upon hearing this, but he did not respond immediately. The true-false great Tao is invisible and intangible. Although it can be used to some extent with the help of the destined children, it has no practical significance. On the contrary, if it can be used to gain an ally who can turn the tide, that would be the most cost-effective. Huan Zhen's face was calm, but his tone was very sincere. "So, what is your purpose?" Zhang Fan asked, looking at the other party. "To seize the change of truth and falsehood and return to God." Huan Zhen only said 8 words. Zhang Fan, however, fell into deep thought. After a long while, Zhang Fan finally spoke, voicing the doubt in his heart. "What difference does it make whether the change of truth and falsehood is with me or with God? Doesn't it all lead to the destruction and reincarnation of the mountain and sea?" Huan Zhen's gaze was deep. "Past, present, perhaps there is no difference. But the future?" He was silent for a while, seemingly contemplating something. After finally confirming the result of his deduction, Huan Zhen continued, if the change of truth and falsehood is with God, then the destruction of the mountain and sea is not truly destruction. Death is the beginning of life, and life is the beginning of death. Reincarnation is endless, and the future is endless. But if the change of truth and falsehood is with him, Huan Zhen did not look at Zhang Fan. Instead, he looked up, towards the approximate location of Li Fan's true body in seclusion, the world of the myriad gods' transformation, beyond the boundless mountain and sea. The mountain and sea will be completely annihilated, reincarnation will cease to exist, and everything will return to one person. This is the outcome we have seen. Zhang Fan was greatly shaken upon hearing this. Reincarnation ceases, everything returns to one person. These 8 words seem to possess infinite magic. Even though he was actually on the side of being absorbed, Zhang Fan couldn't help but feel a little lost. But he quickly sobered up, asking in disbelief, can he really achieve such a level? Huan Zhen nodded. These countless separated destined children are the best proof. Although it's only showing initial signs now, if it's not stopped, what awaits us is only destruction. Destruction. Upon hearing this, Zhang Fan suddenly recalled Fishing Old Man Sr., Xuanyuan Hong, and others who had suddenly disappeared because of him. From this, one could perhaps glimpse the true, his, style of action. He couldn't help but believe at a few points. Zhang Fan then frowned and asked, what kind of person is he exactly? Since you know about the reincarnation of the mountain and sea, you should be very familiar with him. Huan Zhen denied Zhang Fan's conjecture. When the true-false great Tao descends, the mountain and sea reincarnation begins. Everything in the mountain and sea cannot escape the fate of being reset. Even the true-false great Tao is like this. Although we have some cultivation, how can we escape such a fate? It's just that after too many cycles of reincarnation, a very small number of us can vaguely sense something. For example, having an intuition about past events, as if having experienced them before. At the beginning of the mountain and sea's reappearance, this premonition is weakest. Only as the evolution of the mountain and sea progresses, and the sensations accumulate, can one recall more. Therefore, even though I know about the reincarnation of the mountain and sea now, as the mountain and sea is reset, I will still lose all awareness and repeat my past foolish actions, Huan Zhen self-mockingly said. If I am still like this, let alone them. He was referring to the various mountain and sea saints who were still observing and comprehending under the tree. Zhang Fan's expression became solemn, having caught the unexpected meaning in the other's words. May I ask, fellow Taoist, what realm are you exactly? All are in the saint realm. However, unlike most of them, I once achieved the divine body. You can call it the God Achiever. God, such a solemn and weighty word, yet Huan Zhen spoke it lightly, as if uncaring. Zhang Fan naturally knew that everything in the mountain and sea originated from the fallen true God, and he understood the weight of the word, God. Thinking that the cultivator before him had once achieved the godhood, the invisible pressure he felt from the other party seemed to increase by a few points. Actually, strictly speaking, it doesn't count as a true God. As if seeing the change in Zhang Fan's inner thoughts, Huan Zhen smiled and explained. He sighed lightly. The reincarnation of the mountain and sea should not have given birth to a God Achiever. Old God falls, mountain and sea appears. Mountain and sea perishes, new God emerges. It has always been the new God replacing the old God. Once a God, always a God. Either exist in the name of God, or fall and disappear. And the so-called God Achiever? It is a mountain and sea saint who goes against the flow to the time of the mountain and sea's divided soul, forcefully seizing the old God's creation. But then, they are preserved by the reset of the change of truth and falsehood. Although they return to the mortal realm, they have, after all, existed for a period under the name of God. They have become subtly different from other beings in the mountain and sea. But only a little. Huan Zhen gave a lengthy explanation, detailing the various aspects of the God Achiever to Zhang Fan. Only God Achievers can know the truth in the reincarnation of the mountain and sea. So, Senior Fishing Old Man and the others, could they all be God Achievers? Having understood the ins and outs, Zhang Fan thought of having lived and even become accustomed to being with God Achievers. The pressure he felt from Huan Zhen immediately decreased significantly. While sighing in relief, he was even more astonished by the power of the true-false great Tao. Even if he had once possessed it, and even if it was still with him now, Zhang Fan felt that the power of the true-false great Tao was somewhat beyond his imagination. Suddenly, he recalled a sentence Huan Zhen had said earlier, and he felt that something was amiss. Fellow Taoist just said that everything in the mountain and sea cannot escape the fate of being reset. Even the true false great Tao is like this. If that's truly the case, Zhang Fan frowned deeply. Theoretically speaking, shouldn't he also be reset along with everything else? How could he? Huan Zhen's single sentence caused Zhang Fan's words to abruptly stop, and all his doubts vanished. That is because he is an outsider. So that's it. Zhang Fan murmured, repeating the words. Huan Zhen's tone was deep as he continued. Once, at the mountains and sea's end, a group of God achievers who had recovered most of their awareness gathered and discussed the source of the reset. But they could never figure it out. After all, we all achieved divine bodies, yet we were always reset and restored. Everything in the world comes from God. Yet God can be reset by the true false great Tao. This seems completely illogical. Then, when the mountain and sea was on the verge of destruction again, we suddenly realized. Truth and falsehood is a mighty power that even God cannot escape. Although it originates from the true God's body, the true God itself will also be affected by it. We speculate that this might be an innate divine ability of the true God, and also the fundamental origin of the mountain and sea reincarnation. Even if it falls and perishes, it can reappear from nothingness and return to its original state through the true false great Tao. Undying, unperishing, immortal, this is God. From Huan Zhen's descriptions, Zhang Fan seemed to vaguely glimpse the divine might of the true God that had given birth to everything in the mountain and sea. But very quickly, the tone shifted abruptly. If the change of truth and falsehood were still with God, then everything would naturally be fine. But, for some unknown reason, truth and falsehood fell into the hands of an outsider. Divine authority usurped, and because he is from outside, he can avoid the fate of being reset. With the change of truth and falsehood in his hands, his influence even surpasses that of God. Zhang Fan vaguely sensed a faint trace of fear hidden in Huan Zhen's words. With just a thought, he can twist everything you and I know. He can return to the beginning with his past memories, while you know nothing. How can one be an enemy to such an opponent? Through countless cycles of reincarnation, we have never seen a glimmer of hope for a breakthrough. Intel. Fellow Taoist's appearance. 1785. Outside the body. Zhang Fan was noncommittal. He didn't get lost in himself just because of Zhen Xian's few words of flattery. But in some sense, his stance, along with Zhen Xian's, or indeed all living beings in mountain and sea, was fundamentally consistent. Mountain and sea annihilated, reincarnation gone, all returning to one person. The actions taken by the master of true false great Tao to attain the Tao were truly horrifying. Whether for their own survival or driven by Tao to conscience, cultivators in mountain and sea should unite to stop him. Of course, the premise was, everything Zhen Xian said was true. At Zhang Fan's current realm, even if he didn't know the truth originally, he could make an intuitive judgment about the veracity of the conversation upon hearing it. Zhen Xian didn't lie, however, that doesn't mean what he said is the whole picture. Zhang Fan had his own judgment. It was simple. If everything was truly as Zhen Xian said, then Fishing Old Man and Xuanyuan Hong should absolutely stand with Zhen Xian on a united front. But they didn't, they merely created a sheltered world and quietly hid. Zhang Fan's decision had not changed from beginning to end. He wanted to stand before the person behind the scenes himself and ask for an explanation. However, in front of Zhen Xian, Zhang Fan did not reveal his true thoughts. Instead, he shook his head and said, I am but a mere clone, one of countless scattered chess pieces. If the master of true false great Tao is truly as terrifying as you say, what role can I play? Even if we join forces and successfully kill him, aren't you worried that I will become the new master of truth and falsehood, rendering all efforts futile? What we seek is already the limit of our current ability. How could we try to seek an infinite beyond that, inviting trouble upon ourselves? Besides, I believe fellow Taoist would not do that. Among all destined children, you are the only one willing to give up the true false great Tao. Had I not seen this point, this conversation would not have happened. Zhen Xian looked at Zhang Fan, his gaze burning. Zhang Fan sneered. Then I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint fellow Taoist. The reason I gave up was because I couldn't obtain it. Frankly speaking, if the true false great Tao truly appeared before me, allowing me to pluck it, then I would definitely choose it without hesitation. Zhang Fan was interrupted by Zhen Xian before he could finish speaking, but you have already given it up. A good horse doesn't eat way too sow come back for old grass, let alone the true false great Tao. Since you gave up the possibility of possessing the true false great Tao, then even if one day the true false great Tao is masterless, it will certainly not choose the person who actively gave it up. At least, not in this life. Zhen Xian said with extreme confidence. Zhang Fan opened his mouth, momentarily speechless. In the end, he only said, "This is probably just fellow Taoists' guess, isn't it?" In fact, Zhang Fan already had a good idea. The reason Zhen Xian chose to cooperate with him was entirely because he valued his identity as a divided soul of the master of true false great Tao and the possibility that he would not inherit Huan Zhen. As for how much chance of success there was, they simply had no other choice. Since that was the case, Zhang Fan no longer stood on ceremony. "Since you've said all this, if I continue to be modest, it would be slapping fellow Taoist's face. Give this tree to me. From now on, we shall form an alliance and conspire together to reclaim the true false great Tao." As soon as these words were spoken, all the mountain and sea sages, who were engrossed in comprehending the Tao, turned their gaze towards Zhang Fan. Beneath their calm gazes, a hint of malice was hidden. Zhang Fan was fearless, awaiting Zhen Xian's decision. There wasn't much commotion. It was clear that Zhen Xian seemed to hold great weight among the sages. Even with myriad reluctance in their hearts, the sages comprehending the Tao still cleared a path, allowing Zhang Fan to truly arrive beneath the great tree from which countless destined children hung upside down. "Aren't you afraid I'll go back on my word? You agreed so easily." To be honest, Zhang Fan was somewhat surprised by Zhen Xian's decisiveness. "We have no choice, and neither do you," Zhen Xian said. Zhang Fan immediately fell silent. Speechless, he sighed softly and slowly opened his mouth. Using the change of truth and falsehood as his hand, he gently brushed the fruits hanging on the great tree. A gentle breeze seemed to sweep through the remaining mountain and sea, and countless destined children swayed and shook with the wind. Then, one by one, they fell and disappeared. At the same time, Zhang Fan's qi became increasingly ethereal. Indeed, when Zhang Fan attained the Tao and became a sage, he decided to give up comprehending the true false great Tao. However, he had not given up the idea of using the true false great Tao as a convenient tool. Just as Zhen Xian and the surviving sages of mountain and sea had done in this life, only as a destined child, and a clone of the master of true false great Tao. Zhang Fan could personally use the power of the change of truth and falsehood. As one fruit after another fell, the entire great tree withered with them. Leaves turned yellow and drifted away. Branches snapped, fell into the void realm, and turned to ashes. Correspondingly, the lives of the surrounding sages withered like flowers, one by one. Facing death, the sages showed little fear. They merely gazed at the numbers of truth and falsehood in the void realm, calmly awaiting their fate. Zhang Fan hadn't expected that this tree was sustained by the lives of the sages. This finally explained why the sages had been able to maintain their original state during the mountain and sea reset. Though he did not kill the sages died due to his single thought. After all, he had spent most of his life in secluded cultivation, and the only time he had spent with others was in an atmosphere imbued with goodwill. Zhang Fan's heart was inevitably shaken at this moment. It's all right, it's just dying again. Favored by the numbers of truth and falsehood, although they are not like me now, able to see through reincarnation, they also understand their own destiny, which is why they can face death so calmly. Whether our endeavor succeeds or fails, they will certainly reappear with the reset of mountain and sea. Zhen Xian stood beside Zhang Fan and slowly said. In fact, no one else needed to comfort him. The tremor in his heart lasted only a few short moments, and Zhang Fan's attention was then focused on the true-false great Tao that filled the sky. It was originally tied to billions of destined children. Now, however, it flowed like a trickle, all entering Zhang Fan's mouth. His vision gradually brightened. The apocalyptic mountain and sea was no longer dark, everything seemed to have a discernible pattern. Before Zhang Fan's eyes, a scroll seemed to appear. Everything that once existed in mountain and sea was within this scroll. However, as Tao annihilation eroded it, the mountain and sea scenery in the scroll slowly became transparent. In the eyes of ordinary people, mountain and sea naturally disappeared. But in the eyes of the holder of the true false great Tao, as long as power was re-injected, mountain and sea would reappear. This is the Shanghai transformation outline. Deeply attracted by this mysterious scene, Zhang Fan seemed to gain enlightenment and murmured to himself. And it wasn't just that. Beyond the mountain and sea scroll, a scroll bearer seemed to faintly stand. All creation and destruction within the scroll, and even the scroll itself, were under this person's control. After meticulously memorizing all the details within the Mountain and Sea scroll, Zhang Fan strained his gaze, attempting to pierce through the scroll's feng shui seal and look at the scroll bearer. Because of this transgression, the Mountain and Sea scroll instantly trembled violently. The mountain and sea that entered his sight surged up, attempting to obscure Zhang Fan's prying gaze. Zhang Fan used the true-false great Tao he could control to suppress all the anomalies. His goal remained unchanged. He vowed to look at the person holding the scroll outside the painting. The clash of the two forces caused this mountain and sea scroll to be torn apart and crumble inch by inch. And correspondingly, Zhang Fan's divine soul also seemed to develop countless tiny cracks, on the verge of collapse. It wasn't just a simple injury, it was a backlash from the change of truth and falsehood, and his very existence's foundation was constantly disappearing. Longevity and serenity, two powers of the mountain and sea great path, were desperately trying to repair the cracks in Zhang Fan's divine soul. Though it was a drop in the bucket, it bought Zhang Fan more time to observe. Zhang Fan's gaze finally pierced through the obstruction of the mountain and sea scenery and saw the person holding the scroll. Boom, boom, boom. As if his divine soul had suffered a violent impact, all the myriad things of mountain and sea, and even the Tao annihilation of the surrounding void realm, seemed to recede behind a curtain, becoming unimportant and fading from his vision. Even countless Tao paths, and even the true-false great Tao, were like fleeting clouds. In Zhang Fan's eyes, only one person remained. In that instant, he saw himself. And another layered phantom floating on his body. The transformation of God's slaughter world. When Zhang Fan broke through layers of obstacles and, through the change of truth and falsehood channel, looked at Li Fan. Li Fan also, by means of the other's gaze, for the first time, from another person's perspective, examined himself from outside his body. Thus, he also discovered the layered phantom floating on his body. He had clearly stripped away all experiences and memories since reincarnation. Only the purest state from when he first transmigrated remained. But for some unknown reason, there was still some other anomaly existing above his head. For some reason, Li Fan, who suddenly witnessed this scene, was not very surprised. Everything was as expected. In fact, in his opinion, if he had no hidden trump card on him, it would seem inconceivable. I just don't know if this phantom originates from my past self. Or that fallen true god. Li Fan and Zhang Fan's gaze only lasted for a brief moment. After the body outside view disappeared, Li Fan could no longer observe the phantom that had always existed above his head. It seemed as if it didn't exist at all. Even with the aid of the change of truth and falsehood, he couldn't recreate even a hint of it in his mind. Even the memory of this phantom's existence in his mind was slowly fading. After trying and finding he couldn't stop it, Li Fan decided to seize the last few moments to deduce the origin of this phantom as much as possible. First, he ruled out his former self, Li Fan, being at fault. My current understanding of the true-false great Tao is almost at the peak of mountain and sea. Even compared to my former self, it wouldn't be much weaker. I don't think he has the strength to achieve such a degree. Residing within the body yet unknown and unfelt, invisible, unrecordable, unrecallable. Beyond mountain and sea, outside of cognition. True God Phantom. In an instant, Li Fan made his judgment. Still based on what was known before. This world is in endless reincarnation. Even a true God cannot last forever. As long years pass, new consciousnesses will differentiate within their body. Whether this consciousness originates from a previously devoured deity or is purely a new evolution. In short, the old God falls, the new God descends, this is a fixed number. Speaking of falling, it can actually be called returning. Because a God seems to possess uniqueness. After becoming a God is a God. Reincarnation flows, and now it has come to the time of mountain and sea's divided soul. Things have changed. Mountain and sea are merely two differentiated intentions before the new God's evolution, their only purpose is to be a transition during the true God's fall and rebirth. But they foresaw their destined demise. Unwilling to accept it, they attempted to reverse their fate. They set up a grand play, deceiving the heavens and crossing the sea, transforming into stars. If the performance concludes perfectly, then they will replace the God who was supposed to appear, achieving the position of new God. At this point in his deduction, Li Fan's thoughts paused slightly. The true God Phantom was disappearing faster and faster, he had to quickly accelerate his progress. God is unique, but who exactly becomes a God does not seem to be unique. On the original list of becoming gods, mountain and sea's name was not there. But they wanted to forcibly change it. The divine might of a true God is infinite, it can know the past, present, and future. Thus, at the moment of impending demise, it foresaw future changes. So it plucked me from outside existence, as an outsider to break the deadlock. But, is that all? A cold glint flashed in Li Fan's eyes. With a god's foresight, it should have seen everything that happened after I successfully tore apart the mountain and sea drama. Just as Zhen Xian and the others said. Mountain and sea shattered, reincarnation gone, all returning to me. Quote. This is not the result that true God desired. Sacrifice itself, just to break the endless reincarnation of this world and achieve me, this outsider. Is God that kind-hearted? Li Fan snorted coldly. He immediately denied this possibility. But the true God still did so without hesitation. Only because it was absolutely certain that I could break the mountain and sea drama, could destroy the descending stars. But ultimately, I could not slaughter God. God has foresight, seeing all future. Exhausting all possibilities, it did not foresee the scene where I successfully slaughtered God. That's why it did so. Pulling me into work for it, and then wanting me to be a scapegoat. That's a bit too much. Li Fan's state of mind was no longer the anger he felt when he first discovered the truth. He merely let out a helpless laugh. However, behind the laughter, Li Fan's gaze was colder than ever before. Is the only reason for the ultimate outcome this true God phantom above my head? In the remaining time, Li Fan deduced countermeasures as much as possible. The ink faded, and the phantom was no more. Li Fan's expression showed a momentary blankness. It seems, I forgot something extremely important. Feeling the inexplicable palpitation in his heart, Li Fan said thoughtfully. Do you have any clues? He looked at the Huan Zhen phantom standing beside him. The Huan Zhen phantom had no subjective consciousness, only mechanical reactions. To answer Li Fan's question, light and shadows intertwined, attempting to retrace. But ultimately, it found nothing. Li Fan's expression, however, did not change much. Sometimes, no answer in itself is already the answer. I am already at the pinnacle of this world, and what can cause such a strange change in me? Only God. Whether I remember or not, there is no difference. 1786, Fake Universe. Chapter 1772, False Universe Exists. Then, let me see who the final victor will be. Facing the death trap recognized by the true God of this world, Li Fan's resolve remained unshaken. As his thoughts swirled, billions of rays of light, like countless stars, appeared around him. These were the thoughts, feelings, and insights gained from the clones he had deployed earlier. It was as if he had personally experienced countless reincarnations in the mountain and sea, with each cultivation of the Tao being different. As if a divine brush was continuously painting, the originally somewhat empty Tao hall became increasingly sacred and solemn, about to restore its original appearance in the mountain and sea. And the change of truth and falsehood, which was also the Huan Zhen phantom, standing above the Tao hall, became more real and visibly. One could even vaguely see the blurred facial features within the figure. He was 7 or 8 parts similar to Li Fan, yet also incorporated the appearance characteristics of countless destined children. Even more astonishing was Li Fan's own transformation. I am just me, even if I reincarnate countless times in this realm, I will not change in the slightest. The myriad starlight enveloped Li Fan, illuminating his body. However, Li Fan did not change because of this. The starlight, like a torch, helped Li Fan perceive himself in the void realm darkness. This resplendent Tao hall, though it might easily suppress Zhang Sheng of the mountain and sea, is utterly useless before that true God. All Taos and all methods in the mountain and sea originate from the true God. No matter how high one's cultivation, one cannot escape the tribulation of returning to God. If there is an exception, perhaps it is truth and falsehood. Truth and falsehood is a divine ability similar to a divine innate ability, allowing a God to exist eternally in endless reincarnation. Therefore, everything here, even a God, cannot escape truth and falsehood. In other words, a God can actually be seen as the true possessor of Huan Zhen. However, compared to me, an outsider, he cannot retain his memories through repeated Huan Zhen. Although it has this characteristic, it is still impossible to use the change of truth and falsehood to slay a God. Zhang Fan and Zhen Xiyan both believe that I am the master of the true false great Tao. In fact, the only one truly qualified to be called the master of the true false great Tao is the God. A God without the true false great Tao cannot be called a true God, he is merely a God born by accident. Huan Zhen and the true God cannot exist in the world at the same time. If I can prevent Huan Zhen from returning to God, I can actually prevent the true God from descending. It's just a pity. I can't do it. Li Fan couldn't help but recall the very last moment of each mountain and sea. All things returning to God was the destiny of everything in the world. Once the trend was set, even truth and falsehood could not escape it. It seems, as I deduced before, that the only one who can slay a god is me. It's just that previously, I didn't have a concrete idea of how to slay a god. But now, Li Fan lowered his gaze, resting it on Zhang Fan, in the remaining mountain and sea. Perhaps, this is the way to break the deadlock. Any discoveries? Zhen Shiyin's voice came from beside his ear, startling Zhang Fan from his momentary daze. Just as their gazes met, the moment he witnessed those layers of phantoms, Zhang Fan's mind couldn't help but get lost. It was as if he had fallen into a dream. He seemed to have experienced countless bizarre things, but now that he had woken up, he had forgotten everything completely. Only the two overlapping figures, like an inescapable specter, occasionally flashed before Zhang Fan's eyes. This made him shiver all over. After he truthfully recounted what he had seen, Zhen Shiyin also fell into contemplation for a moment. But time was running out for them in the mountain and sea. The tree of truth and falsehood had already withered, and the Tao annihilation tide was fiercely approaching again. The mountain and sea collapsed, and the apocalypse returned. This time, there was no chance to look back. Everything in the world inevitably fell towards its predetermined end, and Zhen Shiyin seemed to have made up his mind. It's time to talk to some old friends. Come with me. Pale light enveloped Zhang Fan, instantly passing through the shattered mountain and sea. They arrived at a peculiar place. The deepest part of the infinite sea, where the foundation stones of the mountain and sea were located. If the mountain and sea had concrete annual rings, then this was the first circle that appeared. Ancient, primal aura flowed freely. But at this moment, even the fundamental logic of the mountain and sea was beginning to collapse. However, here, a silver gleam stood out. Zhen Shiyin brought Zhang Fan and flew rapidly, entering that silver gleam. At this instant, Zhang Fan felt as if he had returned to the sheltered world where the fishing old man and other god ascenders resided. The oppressive feeling brought by the end of returning to God instantly vanished without a trace. Zhang Fan tried to observe this world and found that even with his current strength, his divine sense was suppressed. He could only observe roughly. Boundless and limitless, vast and infinite. Its size and scale seemed to be no less than the current mountain and sea. Yet, there was no evolution of worlds or beings, just an empty universe. As if independent of the mountain and sea, time here was frozen. The various aspects of the mountain and sea's end could not affect it in the slightest. Even if the outside world had already welcomed the apocalypse, this place still maintained its eternal state. Zhang Fan was momentarily stunned. Old friend visiting, why don't you show yourself? Zhen Shiyin's voice echoed continuously, lingering for a long time. A figure, accompanied by subtle ripples, appeared. You're almost dead, why are you running to me? The person, by his appearance, seemed to be a dispirited man. He spoke weakly, as if he had just woken up from a dream. Who is this one beside you? However, upon seeing Zhang Fan, a glint of light burst forth from the dispirited man's eyes. Without another word, he reached out to grab Zhang Fan. I searched high and low for you, but you came to me without any effort. I didn't expect you to deliver yourself to my doorstep today. Zhang Fan only felt that the eternal world he was in disappeared the moment the dispirited man made his move. Or rather, it was all pressed down on him. His body and mind, under this immense pressure, could not move an inch. He could only watch as the other party approached. What are you doing? Fortunately, Zhen Shiyin's words broke this restraint. Under the illumination of the pale light, the eternal world reappeared, and the pressure instantly vanished. He is not the one we are looking for, he is just a clone. Upon hearing this, the dispirited man's expression changed several times. He stared at Zhang Fan, observing him carefully for a long time, before finally confirming. There's actually such a variable. This is bad. The lazy aura on the dispirited man was scattered by the wind, and his expression became extremely serious. Let me introduce you to this one, Jia Yukun. Zhen Shiyin said, pointing to the dispirited man. Greetings, fellow Taoist Jia. Zhang Fan cupped his hands. He didn't care about the other party's sudden attack just now. In Zhang Fan's view, the strength the other party displayed at that moment was even slightly stronger than Zhen Shiyin's. That power, perhaps, comes from this eternal void realm world. Zhang Fan mused thoughtfully. In the infinite reincarnation, God Ascenders are constantly awakening, and the measures they choose to take are not entirely the same. Jia Yukun is attempting to weave and construct an independent void realm space-time, trying to avoid the tribulation of the mountain and sea's annihilation. Seeing that Jia Yukun had no intention of speaking, Zhen Xiyin had to explain the origin of this world on his behalf. Brother Jia's cultivation is profound, almost successful. This world remains even if the mountain and sea are destroyed. Even if Tao annihilation wreaks havoc, it cannot affect this place in the slightest. It's just a pity. Ultimately, it cannot escape the destiny of returning to God. Zhen Xiyin sighed softly. All Taos and all methods in the world originate from God. But this void realm I have woven is not included. If it is strong enough, it should be able to withstand the aftermath of the true God's descent. However, it can escape, but I, myself, cannot escape the tribulation. If I cease to exist, this world will ultimately be like the moon in a mirror, or a flower in water, only able to persist for a brief moment before scattering like a bubble. Jia Yukun also sighed. That's why I've always wanted to get close to the true false great Tao. If I obtain truth and falsehood, perhaps this world can undergo a complete transformation, thoroughly separating from the mountain and sea true God. However, the true false great Tao is by no means something ordinary people can easily touch. If he decides to hide, even if we join forces, it will be difficult to find his traces. I even remember, in many reincarnations, I brushed past him several times, even almost having him within reach. But in the end, he still slipped away. And in this life, although there are ripples of truth and falsehood appearing in the mountain and sea, they are all too weak. One glance is enough to know they are illusions released by the true false great Tao, so I ignored them. Only when I saw you. It seems your comprehension of the true false great Tao has perhaps reached the pinnacle. You almost fooled me. Jia Yukun stared intently at Zhang Fan, speaking slowly. Zhang Fan shook his head slightly. Pinnacle is definitely not the word. But perhaps it will be of some help to Senior in weaving this world. Jia Yukun's eyes brightened involuntarily. Zhang Fan looked at this world again, murmuring, when true is false, false is true. Subtle ripples emerged from Zhang Fan's body. It was as if a tree of truth and falsehood sprouted between his brows, causing the ripples on Zhang Fan's body to rapidly spread throughout this realm. Echoing endlessly, instantly sweeping across the world. Although Zhen Xiyin and Jia Yukun could not feel the fluctuations of the change of truth and falsehood, they could easily sense the changes in this eternal world. Jia Yukun's eyes couldn't hide his delight, and he clapped his hands in praise. Excellent, excellent. The true false great Tao is indeed invisible and unknowable. But with my false universe as a basis, perhaps the various fluctuations caused by the changes of truth and falsehood can be imprinted and recorded. Apart from me, this realm is absolutely void. It is in a primal, desolate state, where any subtle change can appear extremely obvious. By constantly trying, I can always capture the traces of the change of truth and falsehood. Although it's just traces, not the change of truth and falsehood itself. But a glimmer of hope also rose in Zhen Xiyin's eyes. Given time, perhaps we can use the traces left by truth and falsehood to shape and evolve a truth and falsehood unique to this world. Zhang Fan paid no attention to their ecstatic remarks. He was simply focused on wielding his brush and ink, performing the change of truth and falsehood on the blank canvas before him. Although Zhen Xiyin and Jia Yukun had difficulty seeing the changes in truth and falsehood, he could. And compared to performing it in the mountain and sea, the true false great Tao was undoubtedly more obvious in this eternal void realm space-time. The originally elusive and profound Tao, having shed all complex appearances, instead seemed to become simpler. With truth and falsehood as his brush, every moment he wrote creation in this realm, Zhang Fan felt his comprehension of truth and falsehood increase exponentially. It wasn't simply to help Jia Yukun, but also for himself. Invisible ripples echoed ceaselessly, and all three were immersed in them. Who knows how much time passed? Boom! A violent tremor startled the three of them. Zhen Xiyin and Jia Yukun exchanged glances. It seems the mountain and sea has once again entered its apocalypse. Time is too short, simply not enough to leave traces of truth and falsehood. Furthermore, it's still unknown whether these traces will disappear with the reset of the mountain and sea. Jia Yukun said with deep regret. However, there is at least a glimmer of hope. It's worth fighting for. Zhen Xiyin said firmly, we'll drag it out for as long as we can. With that, he transformed into a pale ray of light and broke through the boundary. Zhang Fan paid no attention to Zhen Xiyan's departure, merely continuing to concentrate on his painting. In his continuous attempts, the formless and intangible truth and falsehood seemed to gradually become concrete. Not long after, Zhen Xiyan returned. With him was a purple light. Accompanying it was a stream of curses. If you want to fight for your life, do it earlier. Why call me only when death is imminent? What were you doing before? It was a hunched white-haired old man. Empty Taoist, stop talking nonsense, let's protect him together. After countless reincarnations, this is the only variable we've found. If we miss it, I'm afraid we'll never find it again. The hunched old man continued to grumble, but his body instantly erupted with boundless iridescent light. Purple chi steamed, like the eastern arrival, filling this eternal void realm world. My countless years of accumulation. The empty Taoist was heartbroken. Zhen Xiyan snorted coldly. No matter how much you accumulate, won't it all be lost with the reset of the mountain and sea? You know nothing. Although the mountain and sea are constantly resetting, the speed at which I condense purple chi is getting faster and faster each time. One day, I might be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with a god relying on this boundless purple chi. But in the past, I always committed suicide the moment the great tribulation of returning to God descended. Not seeing a god meant less influence. Choosing to resist this time, I'm afraid my past accumulation will be lost in an instant. We have no choice. There's not much time left for us. With Zhen Xiyan's single sentence, the empty Taoist fell silent. He no longer chattered, his figure faded, leaving only boundless purple chi to cleanse the area. Zhang Fan noticed that this purple chi had no effect on the current eternal space-time, it merely blocked all the tribulations from the outside world. The painting became stable again, allowing Zhang Fan to resume his brushwork. However, outside, it was clearly the final moment of the mountain and sea's destruction. The consumption rate of the purple chi was terrifyingly fast. And the change of truth and falsehood that Zhang Fan was performing also began to show subtle distortions. It was as if the lines he was drawing kept deviating. Almost instantly, Zhang Fan understood why. The true God appears, truth and falsehood return. His heart trembled, then he suppressed the tremor and forcefully continued to depict. On the painting, the change of truth and falsehood became increasingly complete. It was almost exactly as he perceived it. But precisely when he was about to make the final stroke, Zhang Fan's hand suddenly stopped. He simply couldn't draw it. 1787, Cicada Hide. Chapter 1773, Cicada's Concealment. Zhen Xiyan, Jia Yukan. Both of you owe this old man a life. While Zhang Fan hesitated, the boundless and mighty purple chi was completely consumed. Without the protection of the purple chi, this eternal world once again fell into turmoil. What a pity, just a little bit short, Jia Yukan sighed softly. As the creator of this world, he vaguely felt that a supreme and profound Tao law was about to be born here. It was just one step away. But a single step separated heaven and earth. If it could truly be born, the imprint would be complete. With this mark, my eternal void world would also give birth to its own change of truth and falsehood, allowing it to escape infinite reincarnation. Either way, it's going to die anyway. As Jia Yukan pondered, he had already made up his mind. I'll buy you a little more time. Whether it succeeds or not. Without finishing his sentence, a silver glow surged, shooting out beyond the heavens. Although the eternal world seemed to have stabilized again, Zhen Xiyan and Zhang Fan knew that its foundation was already lost. It wouldn't be long before it completely collapsed. The change of truth and falsehood belongs to the true God. And I, this destined child, this clone, will also return. Into his body. This is the so-called inescapable fate. Zhang Fan had vaguely understood the reason why his final stroke could never be completed. So, this change of truth and falsehood, even he has not fully comprehended it. As a clone, it is naturally impossible to surpass the main body. Zhang Fan suddenly felt somewhat relieved. Then his heart stirred. In that case, my comprehension of the change of truth and falsehood is already no less than the main body. How is this possible? In Zhang Fan's long-held belief, his main body, as the mastermind behind everything, must have reached an unfathomable realm of strength, perhaps even capable of contending with a true God. Although he had never given up the idea of seeking an explanation from him, he never dared to underestimate the main body. He never expected to realize now that his lifetime of arduous cultivation had already allowed him to stand on equal footing with him. This was an idea Zhang Fan had never had before. He never expected it, never dared to imagine it. The moment he realized it, an uncontrollable ambition began to grow in his heart. Who was true? Who was false? Who was the master? Who was the clone? It remains to be seen. There's still one last chance. Zhang Fan knew that his main body must be waiting for him outside this eternal world. When this place shattered, before returning to the true God, he would absorb him first. But this is precisely my only chance for survival. Thinking of this, Zhang Fan's eyes flashed with a cold glint as he looked at the nearly completed painting in Zhenxian. Please lend Senior your head for a moment. The brush used to paint the true-false painting appeared inexplicably and then quietly descended. It landed heavily on Zhenxian's body. Zhenxian's face couldn't help but show a hint of surprise. He didn't understand why Zhang Fan had undergone such a drastic change in an instant. You still have a chance to start over, but I may not. Please fulfill this, Senior. Zhang Fan saw that Zhenxian could still strongly endure under the ink of his true tracery brush, only his body trembled slightly, and he was secretly shocked. He did not add more weight to the brush again, but instead, a flash of light transmitted all the insights he had gained in that instant to the other party. Zhenxian's gaze left Zhang Fan and looked outside the eternal void world. He didn't know what he was thinking, but he actually gave up resisting. His figure dimmed, his light gradually receded, and finally, he transformed into a dead white dot. It slowly fell into Zhang Fan's palm. Zhang Fan was silent for a moment, then bowed solemnly towards the place where Zhenxian had fallen, performing a respectful li. Then, without hesitation, he swallowed the dead white dot into his belly. Although for Zhenxian, falling was not truly dying. But to be able to sacrifice a lifetime, just to add a sliver of winning chance to Zhang Fan's desperate gamble, was already an enormous kindness. Zhang Fan seized the last moments, carefully savoring the taste of the dead light left by Zhenxian. Death is but an illusion. For Senior Zhenxian, the true-false great Tao, though unseen and unknowable, he attempted to imitate and represent the true-false creation through the imagery of life and death. The result was like a blind man touching an elephant, only grasping a corner. But it truly had a bit of the true-false flavor. A great tonic. As if a flash of inspiration struck him, Zhang Fan wrote furiously, adding another half-stroke to the true-false painting. Then he looked at this eternal void world again. He could sense that Jia Yukin had already fallen. Just as Jia Yukin had said before, although this world could exist independently of mountain and sea, it was ultimately just a void, its foundation entirely built upon Jia Yukin's cultivation. Facing the might of a true god descending, it had no way to resist. It was no longer just trembling, but on the verge of complete collapse. Zhang Fan put down his brush, and before this world could be destroyed, he extinguished it first. The living are governed by the void, outside of falsehood. In his eyes, a silver-white glow, very similar to that on Jia Yukin's body, flashed and disappeared. Zhang Fan completed the last half-stroke on the true-false painting. I don't seek to fully deconstruct the change of truth and falsehood, I only seek to surpass you. His left eye was silver-gray, his right eye pale white. In his mind, various methods of becoming a god, such as fishing, severing fate, breaking formations, forgetting intent, strange fortune, and stacking paper, simultaneously appeared. This is the fuel to ignite the true-false fire. The true-false painting, personally painted with ink, was instantly set ablaze, transforming into a raging fire that only he could see. The eternal void world was no more, and Zhang Fan fell into the end of returning to God. Even though he had simulated it countless times in his mind, when he was truly immersed in it, he was still momentarily lost. What a terrifying apocalyptic scene this was. Life was no more, mountain and sea was no more. Tao annihilation was no more, the void realm was no more. Only a wisp of starlight, like a divine single eye, hung high above. And like the rising sun, crimson light overflowed, leaping out. It was about to devour everything. Except for the god that was about to descend. There were only two figures left, like duckweed in the wind, still struggling to hold on. One body, one origin, the main body itself. Why don't you return? The main body's voice was cold, like an elder reprimanding a junior in the clan. Zhang Fan only felt himself uncontrollably drifting towards the other party. The power of attraction and attachment was even stronger than that of returning to God. At this moment, Zhang Fan perceived that he seemed incompatible with the surrounding vast returning to God torrent. Only with the main body in front of him did he vaguely align. Is this your reliance? Zhang Fan sneered in his heart. The clone returning to the main body, it seems it should be so. But today, I insist on telling you. There is never anything that is taken for granted in this world. A decisive glint flashed in Zhang Fan's eyes. Not only did he abandon his resistance to the main body's attraction, but he even accelerated his charge towards it. Just as he was about to merge with the main body, a ball of true-false flame ignited fiercely within his body, erupting outwards. How foolish! How could the true-false creation harm me? Facing Zhang Fan's counterattack, the main body remained completely unmoved. He murmured softly, "When true is false, false is true." The raging fire that had been burning fiercely a moment ago instantly extinguished and disappeared. As if it had never existed. The main body's cold voice came, "Is this your reliance? You actually wish to use the true-false great Tao to subvert and replace me?" Before he finished speaking, the main body's expression suddenly changed. Because around Zhang Fan, indistinct figures seemed to emerge. Zhen Xian, Jia Yukan, Fishing Old Man, Xuanyuan Hong, Severing Fate Master, Breaking Formation's Child. They seemed to be independent entities, yet also appeared to be born from Zhang Fan. Didn't you always want me to submit? In this lifetime, I have comprehended numerous mountain and sea great Tao, and even thoroughly understood the foundations of all the God-becoming guests. My comprehension of the true-false great Tao is now even above yours. However, I am willing to give it all to you, let us merge. Zhang Fan's eyes held a hint of madness. As the true-false flame extinguished, his figure collided with the main body. Like two drops of water merging, they instantly became one. But, figures of God-becoming guests, like lingering spirits, appeared within them. Huan Zhen, Huan Zhen. The starlight from above their heads grew increasingly intense. The carrier of the true-false great Tao, uncontrollably drifted towards that high-hanging single eye. A distorted voice, repeatedly roared, "Huan Zhen." But due to the presence of the other illusory figures, the change of truth and falsehood was difficult to activate. Each time Huan Zhen was about to activate, another faint voice would sound, interrupting the process of Huan Zhen. Huan Zhen, no return. Huan Zhen, no return. The illusory figures of the God-becoming guests were not truly the fallen God-becoming guests. Instead, they were anchor points Zhang Fan used to distinguish himself from the main body. Only the mountain and sea God-becoming guests could retain some vague memories during the continuous reset of mountain and sea. In this lifetime, through Zhang Fan's interactions with the various God-becoming guests, he confirmed that his main body had never interacted with them in previous reincarnations. All possibilities of mountain and sea, the paths he had walked, the things he had experienced. The main body could have experienced them all. Only the various aspects of the God-becoming guests were exceptions. Thus, they could be used to distinguish him, Zhang Fan, from the main body. Upon closer inspection, although the two drops of water had merged, the drop that was added later, however, was tainted with certain distinct characteristics, allowing it to temporarily exist independently. Undoubtedly, with the main body's control over the clone, this peculiarity could not last long. A clone, after all, was just a clone. From its very creation, an unchangeable fate was set. Under normal circumstances, these illusory figures of God-becoming guests would at most only prolong Zhang Fan's life for a moment. They couldn't change anything at all. But now, being in the final moments of returning to God, this fleeting opportunity was enough to reverse everything. The distance to falling towards the true God grew closer, yet Zhang Fan showed no sign of giving up his struggle against him. He seemed intent on dragging him down with him. The main body finally completely lost control. Do you want to die? If you want to die, don't drag me with you. As long as Huan Zhen can be achieved, there will still be all possibilities. If we fall into the true God, then it will be eternal damnation, with no chance to start over. Anger, panic, all the main body's ugly displays were seen by Zhang Fan. He merely looked on coldly. It is precisely because I don't want to die that I must fight with my life. Starlight scattered everywhere, as if completely leaping into the world. The high-hanging star, at this moment, was already like a great sun, standing proudly alone. Both Zhang Fan and the main body could clearly perceive that the change of truth and falsehood attached to them was becoming increasingly thin. There was a possibility of it completely leaving at any time. Madman, madman, if this continues, we will both die. The main body roared, breaking down. Huan Zhen, Huan Zhen. Zhang Fan's gaze was burning. In the face of a life-and-death crisis, his mind became even calmer. Sensing that the awaited opportunity had arrived, Zhang Fan finally dispersed the anchor points of the various god-becoming guest images. No longer resisting the complete fusion of the two, the main body was overjoyed. He eagerly wanted to completely devour Zhang Fan, and then return to the initial anchor point. But, the next moment, as if he had eaten a stone, the main body not only failed to digest Zhang Fan, but instead bit down so hard that his mouth was full of blood. How is this possible? How could you? Zhang Fan sneered. Without the blessing of the change of truth and falsehood, how much stronger can your so-called main body truly be than me? Let us have a fair fight. Let's determine superiority and also decide life and death. With that, Zhang Fan lunged towards the main body. No Dao law, no divine ability. Only a bloody, pure battle of wills. Two extremely similar, or rather, completely identical divine souls, fighting a life and death struggle for their own survival. Until death. At this moment, they seemed to have forgotten the returning to God apocalypse outside, forgotten the fate of eternal damnation that was about to befall them. Their eyes held only each other, determined to decide a victor. At all costs. The tragic intensity of it could not be described to outsiders. To an outsider, it seemed like only an instant. But to the two in the arena, it felt like billions of years. Damn it, you damn it. The main body was on his last breath, cursing incessantly. However, the only response he received was Zhang Fan's unrestrained laughter. The water drop changed again. The two completely merged into one. In the end, I won. Zhang Fan, as the victor, was incredibly weak, yet he felt no great joy in his heart. As a clone, he had devoured the main body and inherited everything from the other party. But at this moment, he had no time to examine it closely. The remaining change of truth and falsehood in his body was already as thin as a wisp of smoke. He was infinitely close to the true God's return. Fortunately, heaven did not forsake me. The change of truth and falsehood, even if only an inch remains, can still be activated. Huan Zhen, Huan Zhen. Zhang Fan finally shouted those two words that the main body had shouted countless times before. There was no longer any other will to obstruct him. After a brief pause, the true-false great Tao descended upon this place. The starlight scattered across the sky suddenly dimmed. It was as if an invisible giant hand had grabbed the sun in the sky. And then, with an irresistible and abundant force, dragged it down, step by step. Before Zhang Fan's eyes, a strange scene unfolded. It was as if time was flowing backward, countless overflowing, dazzling starlight slowly returning within the star. Profound darkness surged forth once again. That cold stillness, compared to the divine light, was instead even more reassuring. This time was truly too dangerous. It was just a hair's breadth away from the true God's final descent. Erasing the true God that was about to descend, the reset of Huan Zhen took longer than all previous times combined. But it ultimately succeeded. The string that had been taut in Zhang Fan's mind finally loosened. He let out a long sigh of relief. He finally gazed at the fading figure of the true God, full of vigor. I can defy heaven and change my fate, seizing control from the main body. From now on, I can shatter stars and slay gods. Just you wait. As if sensing Zhang Fan's thoughts, at the last moment, the fading starlight suddenly erupted again for an instant. Then it vanished into invisibility. Rolling darkness followed immediately, engulfing Zhang Fan's consciousness. 1788. Shanyan. Chapter 1774. Benevolent Evolution. Anchored for 1 year. As if waking from an extremely long dream, Zhang Fan only felt a splitting headache. His mind was blank, he knew nothing of who he was or his current situation. Venerable. Bai Shuyu rushed over, her face full of worry. Her appearance was like a spark, illuminating his blank and missing memories. All sorts of past scenes continuously emerged. Aunt, Zhang Fan instinctively called out, then fainted again. 3 years later, the battle with my main body was even more brutal than I imagined. Both of us fought to the point of exhaustion, and the most fatal part was that when Huan Zhen was finally activated, it was too close to the end of Guihai. Even after these 3 years, I've used the true-false great Tao to continuously wash over it. That blazing starlight still occasionally pops out. Lying on a chair, looking at the setting sun, Zhang Fan pressed his slightly bulging temples. Forcibly wielding the change of truth and falsehood with his frail and sickly body meant that his current body had not fully recovered from its weakened state. Even a brief moment of thought made his mind feel a natural weariness. Fortunately, Aunt is still here to take care of me, Zhang Fan sighed inwardly. Just then, Bai Shuyu's voice came. Venerable, it's dark. It's time to come home for dinner. She pulled Zhang Fan, who was in a wheelchair, back into the house and personally fed him. Aunt, I have the strength to eat by myself, Zhang Fan said, somewhat helplessly. Bai Shuyu frowned. You said that a year ago too, and then you just fainted again. Let's make sure you recover fully first. Although your aunt hasn't read many books, I understand the principle that sickness comes like a mountain and leaves like silk extraction. Then, without allowing for argument, she continued to bring food to Zhang Fan's mouth. A simple meal took almost half an hour. Long and warm. Aunt is such a good person, yet my main body actually did such things to her. He was truly worse than a beast. Not only did he control her like a puppet, but the plan to help Aunt achieve immortal ascension also ended without success. With the power of true spirit infusion, coupled with the true false great Tao, even a mortal could be helped to achieve immortal ascension. Yet, he chose not to, preferring to assist outsiders. Zhang Fan shook his head inwardly. In his opinion, there was a difference between close and distant relations. Dao Da, Feng Kun, and Shou Chu certainly couldn't compare to Bai Shuyu. I've received your body and inherited your karma. The sins you've committed, let me repay them. In this life, I am determined to take Aunt and leave this Xuanwang world together. Zhang Fan secretly made up his mind. However, he was not in a hurry to set off, but decided to patiently recover from his injuries first. According to the main body's memories, this Xuanwang world was indeed extremely dangerous, a slight misstep could lead to eternal damnation. How should I put it? As expected of the main body. Even with the treasure of Huan Zhen, to successfully fight his way out of such a place is truly not simple. Zhang Fan compared his previous life's experiences with those of his main body, and he had to admit that his own journey had been truly smooth sailing, almost unbelievably lucky. Or perhaps, the main body cast countless clones in mountain and sea. Only lucky ones like me could survive until the end. As for the final desperate gamble, turning the tables, that was entirely due to my own tenacious will and indomitable spirit. Whenever he recalled how he, in desperation, used the end of Guihai to counterattack, Zhang Fan couldn't help but feel proud. Reaching the peak of mountain and sea, the highest point below true God, the main body is indeed an unparalleled overlord. It's just a pity that the student has surpassed the master. I am even better. His heart grew more and more complacent, and even the injuries to his body and divine soul seemed to alleviate. After a long while, his surging emotions finally calmed down. Zhang Fan lay on the bed, and in the night, he silently chanted Huan Zhen. The next moment, countless firefly-like lights seemed to gather from the surrounding darkness. They formed a light screen, slowly unfolding. But in the midst of it, there seemed to be some resistance. The light screen formed extremely slowly. And from time to time, strange lights would flash by, just like the sudden burst of starlight at the end of the previous life. Zhang Fan knew that Huan Zhen was not damaged. Rather, in his current state, the true God's influence had not been completely removed. Huan Zhen might be at risk of being eroded, and thus instinctively resisted. Zhang Fan tried again. The more the Huan Zhen light screen unfolded, the faster the starlight flickered. The brilliant light spread, almost returning to the time of Guihai's end. Zhang Fan, of course, knew this was an illusion, but he still felt a surge of fear. Forget it, let me completely wash away the influence of the God first. Zhang Fan dismissed all thoughts and fell into a deep sleep. It took him another 10 years to fully recover. During this period, Zhang Fan also secretly acted to slow down his anti-aging process. Although this delayed his recovery speed somewhat, Zhang Fan believed it was all worth it. And in order to make the path of cultivation seem more reasonable, immediately after recovering, Zhang Fan used the unpredictable Zan force of truth and falsehood to change the environment of the Xuanwang world. The mortals here cannot cultivate, all because of the immortal mortal miasma. The Tao of this heaven and earth was formed by Chuan Fa defying the principles of heaven and earth. Having inherited the memories of his main body, Zhang Fan was very familiar with all the past events of the Xuanwang world. But he didn't have much of a good impression of it. Those who block the path, it's better if they disappear. With a single thought of truth and falsehood, Chuan Fa and Heavenly Doctor were directly erased from this world by Zhang Fan. As if they had never existed. Without Chuan Fa's suppression, the Xuanwang Heavenly Tao, amidst continuous rumbling, slowly returned to its normal operation. With another glance, he destroyed the immortal sealing array that sealed the Great Zan small world. A few days later, at the dinner table, Bai Shuyu suddenly said, Venerable, have you felt that the weather has become much more comfortable these past few days? It's strange, it was still so hot a while ago. Zhang Fan nodded in agreement. There was no need for someone to actively spread cultivation technique. As long as there was spiritual qi, cultivators would naturally be born. Half a month later, the first qi refining cultivator was born in the Great Zan small world. The matter of immortal cultivation spread like wildfire. Cultivation, according to them, does that mean I can also cultivate? In the room, Bai Shuyu said with disbelief, feeling the clearly perceptible surging spiritual qi within her body. What about you, Venerable? After a moment, Bai Shuyu asked with great concern. Aunt, don't worry, I also feel the spiritual qi in this world, Zhang Fan said with a smile. Bai Shuyu couldn't help but feel relieved. Thank heavens, thank ancestors. Once the path of cultivation was opened, the two left Great Zan and entered the Xuanwang world to seek further possibilities. And with Zhang Fan's secret protection, there would naturally be no risks. They had a smooth journey, reaching the realm of Dao integration. With Chuan Fa gone and the path to longevity severed, they had reached the end of cultivation in the Xuanwang world. The two decided to venture deep into the Dark Star Sea, seeking the legendary possibility of immortal ascension. The obstacle to leaving, the nameless hungry immortal, had already been secretly erased by Zhang Fan. The high wall's shackles were also insignificant in the face of the change of truth and falsehood. However, to make things more reasonable, Zhang Fan deliberately created some trouble. On the surface, it appeared that they had gone through countless hardships to enter the high wall and obtain Shouchu's legacy. Infinite sea, mountain above. This world is actually so vast. Bai Shuyu was stunned and lost in thought upon learning the truth of mountain and sea. True immortal, nameless, transcendence. The three great realms that ordinary people found difficult to surmount, Bai Shuyu easily stepped through with Zhang Fan's care. Next, it will be truly interacting with mountain and sea. For Aunt, mountain and sea is still too dangerous. Only that protected world is safer, Zhang Fan thought as he looked at Bai Shuyu's face. Towards the distant depths of mountain and sea, where Fishing Old Man Senior was located. Zhang Fan silently chanted, "May the hooked one be willing." In the ethereal void realm, a faint sound of surprise seemed to come. A moment later, a tremendous force traversed mountain and sea. It enveloped Zhang Fan and Bai Shuyu together, pulling them into the world where the guests of becoming gods resided. Bai Shuyu, like a fish in a basket, instantly lost consciousness. Zhang Fan, however, instantly broke free with the change of truth and falsehood. He stood before Kui Diao Wang. "Senior, long time no see," he said with a smile. "You are." Kui Diao Wang narrowed his eyes. Kui Diao Wang did indeed vaguely feel that the person before him seemed very familiar. But it was only a vague feeling. Mountain and sea had not yet reached a critical state, and the memories of the guests of becoming gods had not fully awakened. Kui Diao Wang was unaware of the events that had transpired in the previous life. "Everyone, please come out together." With that, the profound aura of the true false great Dao permeated Zhang Fan's body. Then it suddenly shifted and flowed. Zan Ming, Kui Diao, Wang Ji, Chang Sheng, Po Zhen. All the great Daos manifested. The guests of becoming gods, who had been resting in this protected world, were shocked when they sensed their own Dao paths on another person. Their figures continuously appeared, surrounding Zhang Fan. Lianshan, Guihai, and Tai, the three saints, possess the method of united hearts and virtues. "Are you all willing to join me?" Ignoring the gradually strange atmosphere in the field, Zhang Fan simply spoke frankly. United hearts and virtues. Although the guests of becoming gods lived together, they didn't particularly see eye to eye. Naturally, they were unwilling. But the secret Zhang Fan revealed at this moment truly piqued their curiosity. Po Junzi suddenly said, "I have a compromise method, called Youthful Journey. It can reproduce past experiences, without the power of united hearts and virtues, but it can also prove your origin." Looking at the expressions of the other guests of becoming gods, they seemed to prefer this option. Zhang Fan sighed lightly, feigning helplessness. "It's just a pity, everyone, that you will miss out on the true-false great Dao." True-false. Upon hearing this, the guests of becoming gods all burst forth with uncontrollable brilliance in their eyes. At the same time, they seemed to be deep in thought. "So that's how it is. No wonder you could master our Dao. If it's the change of truth and falsehood, then everything makes sense." Like a stone stirring up 1,000 ripples, before, true false, even the saints who had once become gods lost their composure. In the end, they could not resist the temptation to glimpse the truth and falsehood, and the guests of becoming gods agreed to united hearts and virtues with Zhang Fan. Within the protected world, a brief surge of activity. Then the entire world seemed to fall into an eerie stillness. After a long while, the guests of becoming gods finally awoke from their marvelous insights. So, truth and falsehood are like this. To hear the Tao in the morning, and die in the evening, is enough. Even if one cannot escape the fate of becoming a god in the end, there are no regrets. I didn't expect you to actually succeed. The guests of becoming gods each sighed with emotion, only Xuanyuan Hong was overjoyed. With Zhang Fan's help, everyone had somewhat recovered their memories from the previous life. Xuanyuan Hong said, "In the last reincarnation, we sensed the true-false great Tao descending to directly erase us. Knowing that it must have been the methods secretly laid by Senior Zan Ming taking effect, even though we couldn't change the outcome of being erased by truth and falsehood, we felt quite satisfied. Before disappearing, we decided to help you one last time. We originally didn't hope for too much. But we never expected." Zan Ming suddenly spoke at an inopportune moment. That former master of Huan Zhen, who rose from obscurity, from the dangerous lands of the Xuanwang world, step by step to the peak of mountain and sea. He was meticulous, ruthless, and his methods were extraordinary. He repeatedly managed to survive from desperate situations. And this time, he was actually backfired by his own clone. Could it be a scheme he laid out? As soon as these words were spoken, the scene instantly grew cold. Zhang Fan responded immediately, his expression arrogant, absolutely impossible. Just as Li Fan was certain that he had truly perished and transformed into Huan Zhen. Now Zhang Fan was also absolutely certain that it was indeed his own desperate struggle in a life-or-death situation that allowed him to successfully seize back control from his main body, and not a scheme by his main body. But seeing the thoughtful expressions of the guests of becoming gods present, Zhang Fan's expression changed several times in an instant. A moment later, he still said solemnly, "Please, everyone, help me investigate thoroughly." Since they had already united their hearts and virtues, there were no longer any private secrets to speak of. Therefore, Zhang Fan directly opened his divine soul, allowing the guests of becoming gods to examine it. Under the united hearts and virtues, there was no fear of danger. Given the gravity of the matter, Kui Diao Weng and the others dared not be negligent. They began to inspect meticulously. Once, twice. After a long while, everyone finally withdrew their divine sense. It is a unified whole, without any flaws, naturally formed. "It seems we were overly concerned," said Zan Ming. Under the end of Guihai, without the true false great Tao's blessing, the so-called master of Huan Zhen had no advantage whatsoever. Either outcome was possible. A divided soul backfiring on the main body is indeed feasible. The guests of becoming gods exchanged glances, finding no flaws. However, after all, the master of Huan Zhen possesses an advantage that we cannot compare to. In countless cycles of reincarnation, he has always been able to retain his memories. It's inevitable that he might have some methods we don't know about. It's good to be more cautious. Although that was said, they didn't have any particularly good way to intervene in the struggle between the clone and the main body. All they could do was remind him. Moving past this matter, everyone then began to discuss the main topic. Now that the true-false Great Tao was on their side. Then, what should they do next? With the true-false Great Tao in hand, there was a possibility of overthrowing True God. Coupled with Zhang Fan, this outsider. Even the guests of becoming gods, who had always chosen to lie flat in this world, gradually began to stir with ambition. I will certainly not follow that story, swallowing all of mountain and sea, and slaying all gods. But how exactly can we avoid falling into reincarnation again while preserving mountain and sea? 1789, Tao Mark. Chapter 1775, Tao Mark. Jia Yukin's eternal void world can be considered as a backup option. The previous life didn't succeed in inscribing the marks of change of truth and falsehood, but after devouring the true spirit and gaining deeper insights in this life, there's been a qualitative change. Perhaps it's worth trying again. Xuanyuan Hong said first. What about your path to true godhood? Lord Zanming's words were astonishing. Even if you obtained the change of truth and falsehood's fortune, becoming a savior is not an easy task. You still need to patiently accumulate experience over several more lives, observing all sorts of changes. The old fisherman, however, was not so optimistic. Although they were of one mind, the various true gods still held different opinions on this matter. Zhang Fan merely listened, not easily voicing his thoughts. Regardless, we must first visit Senior Zhen Xian and Senior Jia Yukan. Confidently settling by Shuyu there, Zhang Fan, with the help of the old fisherman and others, first found Zhen Xian, who was hidden in the mountain and sea. It must be said that Zhen Xian was indeed very well hidden. Even though he already knew of his existence, Zhang Fan searched the mountain and sea thoroughly but couldn't find any trace of Zhen Xian. Even when he activated the Tao he had comprehended from the other party's cultivation, Zhen Xian still remained secluded. Ultimately, it was a collective, dragnet search by the true gods that finally located him. Gathering such a large force, I'm afraid you don't have good intentions. Zhen Xian stared at the group of people who had suddenly burst in. Zhang Fan said somewhat helplessly, fellow Taoist might not believe it, but I'm here to repay a kindness. Repay kindness? Zhen Xian sneered. You actually understand the Xian Tao I comprehended, so you must have gained it by killing me in the previous life. No wonder I vaguely had an impression of you. This time, you've gathered so many helpers. Zhen Xian's eyes gleamed with ferocity. Stop rambling, let's fight. Although you have many people, I, Zhen Xian, am not necessarily afraid of you. Facing Zhen Xian's misunderstanding, Zhang Fan simply said, you used Xian as a brush, attempting to depict change of truth and falsehood, but you always sought it in vain. Now that the true false great Tao is right before your eyes, don't you want to give it a try? Thus, with their minds united, all misunderstandings vanished. Zhen Xian was overjoyed, like a completely different person from before. Good. I can't believe you actually succeeded. The true false great Tao is indeed profoundly mysterious. The deathly pale light that occasionally flickered around him deepened, and with Zhang Fan's perspective, he finally saw the ultimate fortune he had been painstakingly pursuing. Zhen Xian, who was already at the pinnacle of the mountain and sea, saw his cultivation and strength advance by leaps and bounds in a short period. In fact, after glimpsing the change of truth and falsehood, each of the true gods gained something. However, the connection between their Tao and the change of truth and falsehood was far less intimate than Zhen Xian's. Therefore, their gains were also significantly less. After meeting Zhen Xian, the last task was to find Jia Yukan. I wonder if there are any marks left in his world. Soon, everyone's doubts were dispelled. Under Zhen Xian's guidance, the moment they returned to the eternal void world, Zhang Fan sensed a faint, familiar feeling. And Jia Yukan stood in the center of the world, staring at the mark that shouldn't have appeared, his expression solemn. It wasn't fully preserved, just a faint, lingering remnant. But it's definitely a good start. Everyone was overjoyed, as if they had seen hope. After another round of shared understanding, Jia Yukan's doubts finally vanished. He was even more excited than the other true gods. To gain one is to gain all. If the mark were complete, this eternal world might truly be able to give birth to its own change of truth and falsehood. Finally, Taoist Kong was also found, and an unprecedented scene of harmony and joy filled the mountain and sea. With their shared purpose as their bond, everyone helped Zhang Fan in writing the change of truth and falsehood scroll, attempting to engrave the marks of change of truth and falsehood. At the same time, the true gods were also discussing the possibility of promoting Zhang Fan to true godhood. In the long reincarnation, we have all defeated the mountain and sea and attained the divine position. However, according to the true spirit's memory, the star we faced after becoming a true god was not a truly fallen true god returning, but the true mountain and sea. In other words, though we call ourselves true gods, we are in fact nothing more than false gods. However, fellow Taoist Zhang Fan may be able to attain the Tao of a true god. This was also the optimal solution reached by everyone after collective discussion. All things return to true godhood, how to reverse it? The answer to this question, even though they already stood at the pinnacle of living beings, pooling their wisdom, was difficult to find. Only by becoming a true god, perhaps, can a solution be found. The only question is, after becoming a true god, will I still be myself? Zhang Fan's gaze swept over everyone. Although the inherited true spirit memory was somewhat incomplete, the fear of the ultimate return to true godhood in his heart was incredibly clear. Therefore, this step requires extreme caution. After all, no one in this world knows what truly happens after becoming a true god. We are merely tiny consciousnesses living within one link of the long, infinite reincarnation. There was no rush to make a decision, After all, this life had just begun, and there was still ample time for preparation. The depiction of the change of truth and falsehood scroll proceeded more smoothly than Zhang Fan had anticipated. Perhaps it was due to the battle where he devoured the true spirit, which caused his own essence to undergo another transformation. He easily accomplished what he, and even the true spirit, couldn't achieve in the previous life. In the eternal void world, an boundless scroll flashed by. It appeared in the world, yet it seemed to encompass the entire world within it. It only appeared for an instant, then vanished. But everyone saw it clearly. This world is no longer void. Jia Yukin wept with joy, and under the influence of their shared purpose, the other true gods were also filled with emotion. Now, the primary task is to find a way to delay the arrival of the end. To allow the change of truth and falsehood to emerge from this mark. Zhang Fan nodded. Although the mark of change of truth and falsehood is formed, it is after all just an imprint. It still cannot escape the changes of truth and falsehood. Each reset will likely significantly diminish the mark. Only when the change of truth and falsehood belonging to this realm is born, using truth against truth. Only then can an unchanging constant be left in the repeated resets. Another unchanging constant, besides me, this outsider. Zhang Fan repeated. With a unified opinion reached, it was now time for the true gods to display their divine abilities. We've been hidden for so long, it's about time we became more active. Lord Zonming spoke first. I'll go to the primordial immortal realm first and forcibly put an end to those people's thoughts. If we want to extend the mountain and sea's existence as much as possible, the first priority is to relink the mountain and sea and strengthen its interior. Only the Saint realm can traverse and relink. The group in the primordial immortal realm can serve as a good aid. Not knowing what he thought of, the usually lazy old fisherman's eyes suddenly flashed with a hint of excitement. He suddenly stood up and said, I'll go with you. It's been a long time since I've taken action, and I'm a bit itching to fight. If only Lord Zonming, a single true god, were to act, there might be some complications. But if the old fisherman were added, the saints of the primordial immortal realm, even if numerous, would not be able to stir up any waves. Everyone present was absolutely certain of this. After all, only after becoming a true god would one truly understand the immense gap between a true god and a mortal. Although they were merely transient true gods, the changes brought about by their experience of becoming a true god were enough to crush other saints of the mountain and sea. Not to mention, they now had the blessing of the change of truth and falsehood. Primordial immortal realm, all things competed, and great contention lay hidden. After countless years of struggle, this realm had reached a subtle and strange balance. All saints were secretly dormant, quietly awaiting the emergence of variables to seize the opportunity to become a true god. However, the appearance of Lord Zonming and the old fisherman did not attract their attention at all. The old fisherman looked around, his eyes filled with emotion. It's been a long time since I've been to this place. I was once like this, stubbornly deluded. Lord Zonming, however, felt little emotion, his tone chilling as he said, waking them up early is actually a good thing for them. Let's do it. The instant Lord Zonming finished speaking, all the saints in this realm, no matter where they were hidden or in what form, were horrified to discover a blade, existing between reality and illusion, silently suspended above their heads at some unknown time. It had no physical form, yet it could not be removed by any method. With the blade hanging over their heads, it was as if their lives hung by a thread. Most of the saints were enraged, trying to find the master behind the blade's shadow. Some, vaguely sensing something amiss, wished to escape this realm and flee to the mountain and sea. However, the moment they were about to leave the primordial immortal realm, their vision went black. Then, they found themselves in an unknown place. Just stay put for now. A calm voice came from above, as if containing an undeniable authority. This voice is Mountains and Seas Angler. His strength, is it truly so terrifying? The saints were filled with terror, yet at the same time, they couldn't hide their various doubts. Locking onto all saints in an instant, capturing all saints with a single thought. What kind of realm was this exactly? If they were so strong, why didn't they participate in the divided soul struggle? Just as they were puzzled, figures from above were thrown in one after another. They were all familiar faces from the primordial immortal realm. The saints became even more terrified. It didn't take much time to pack up the primordial immortal realm. Sigh, how boring. I originally thought they would at least put up some resistance. Lord Zonming sighed. I can release them all, and then you can try again. Without the change of truth and falsehood? The old fisherman suggested with a smile. No, forget it, too much trouble. Lord Zonming shrugged. Then he suddenly sighed again. The change of truth and falsehood is indeed infinitely profound. But it doesn't belong to us. I'm afraid that in the next life, without the shared purpose and the blessing of change of truth and falsehood, it will be difficult to adapt, and then greed will arise. Just like how we once yearned for true godhood. Although we knew it was unattainable, the obsession remained. If such a thing truly happens, please stop me, Lord Zonming said very solemnly. Me too. The old fisherman put away his smile. A moment later. It's been a long time since I've had such a bountiful harvest, we should celebrate. A gourd appeared in the old fisherman's hand. After taking a big gulp, he casually tossed it to Lord Zonming. Lord Zonming didn't mind and drank it down heartily. Then the two looked at the now silent primordial immortal realm and quietly returned. The saints were released. Although they gained freedom, the high-hanging blade above their heads remained, and the saints did not act unwisely. Becoming a true god is an illusory matter. There's no need for you all to do useless work. Of course, I know that persuasion won't work on you. So I've placed a blade above your heads. I ask all of you to assist in re-linking the mountain and sea. The day the mountain and sea is rebuilt, I will grant you freedom. Lord Zonming said coldly, although his words were very polite, even using the word, please. But the saints clearly felt the sharp edge of the blade above their heads, drawing a little closer. Even if they dared not agree, they all nodded in assent. It's just that the mountain and sea are endless, to successfully relink them. Even if we act, it's probably just a drop in the bucket. Ta said in a deep voice. Don't worry, you only need to take the lead. The speaker was Zhang Fan. In a single thought, hundreds of thousands of illusory figures separated from Zhang Fan. I will continuously create saints of the mountain and sea through the method of true spirit infusion. You will be the main force, and the newly formed saints will be supplementary. With everyone's efforts, even though the mountain and sea currently has countless ravines and chasms, it won't take long to successfully relink it. True spirit infusion, creating saints. The saints of primordial immortal realm were all shocked upon hearing this. The familiar mountain and sea they once knew shattered in an instant. They suddenly realized that the truth of the mountain and sea might be far more profound than they had imagined. Circumstances were stronger than people. Even if they were unwilling in their hearts, under the urging of the blade's light above their heads, the saints could only comply. Relinking the mountain and sea was indeed a tedious and arduous task. Even with the strength of the primordial immortal realm saints, and even with the continuous reinforcement of subsequent saints, the saints were still physically and mentally exhausted in the long process of rebuilding the mountain and sea. However, after the blade's shadow above their heads mercilessly cut down, Suo, who wanted to escape this fate, the remaining saints all settled down. They continued reluctantly. Suo did not perish either. The Zonming blade flashed, and Suo lost his Tao, falling from the saint realm. But he was then forcibly infused with true spirit, given another Tao, and sent back into the great undertaking of relinking the mountain and sea. It was just that this time, it was far from as comfortable as before. Like all the other continuously created saints, he had to physically exert himself, traverse the void realms, and then use his body as a bridge to construct the relinking pathways for the mountain and sea. And the saints of primordial immortal realm only needed to oversee the overall situation, acting at crucial moments to ensure everything went smoothly. The difference between them might not be apparent in the short term, but accumulated over time, the experiences were truly like heaven and earth. The vast difference in Suo's Qianhu Jingyu completely extinguished the primordial immortal realm saints' thoughts of escaping. Although the mountain and sea relinking project was long, fortunately, given the current situation, it was not without an end in sight. Just endure it, and it would pass. Once the mountain and sea were relinked, they would be free. With the realm and strength of Lord Zonming and the old fisherman, the true gods, they surely wouldn't deceive them. Fellow Taoist fans' method is indeed excellent. I originally thought that suppressing and supervising would require a lot of effort. I never expected the saints to be so submissive, it saved us a lot of trouble. Old man Wang Ji sighed in admiration. It's just, the true gods looked at the eternal void world. The birth of change of truth and falsehood still seemed far off. What if the mountain and sea are successfully relinked, but the new change of truth and falsehood hasn't arrived yet? Zhang Fan's face was calm, his gaze profound. Then we can only make the saints of the mountain and sea suffer a bit more. 1790. Divine taste. Chapter 1776, Divine Taste. The mountain and sea were destroyed, and then returned to the stars. This was fate, a foregone conclusion. Even with the combined efforts of the saints, they could only temporarily reverse the situation. But what the God-ascending guests wanted was merely to delay as much as possible. In addition to creating enough time for the eternal void world to nurture true-false great Tao traces, they also needed to find a fundamental way to counter the end of the return to God. Although the life of the mountain and sea was long, it still seemed insufficient. From the beginning of mountain and sea to the end of time, it spanned a total of 160 billion years. The number of mountain and sea fragments broken by Tao Annihilation's invasion also numbered in the millions. Restoring a section of the mountain and sea was a major project that required the concerted efforts of many saints. However, what initially seemed like an insurmountable task progressed unexpectedly quickly. Countless clones of Zhang Fan, imbued with true spirit and divine ability, resolved the supply issues for the saints in the void realm. The God-ascending guests and the primordial immortal realm saints took over all charge. 100 billion years of shattered mountain and sea were thus slowly repaired, bit by bit. Even the saints who participated throughout, looking back, still found it incredible. Before, I scoffed at the idea of restoring the mountain and sea. Now it seems it's not that difficult. Saints working together, putting aside all disputes. This itself is an almost impossible feat. I'm curious what those God-ascending guests are truly planning together. Forget it, don't think about it. It only adds to the trouble. I've been tired for too long. After the restoration is complete, I want to rest properly. Soon, under the gaze of all, the last rift in the mountain and sea was repaired. While the saints were finally relieved, a faint sense of bewilderment also welled up in their hearts. For a long time, they had always aimed at restoring the mountain and sea. It had almost become a habit and instinct. Now that the project was finally complete, the saints, for a time, felt lost and somewhat at a loss. The God-ascending guests fulfilled their promise. The life-severing blade above their heads gradually faded, and the threat was gone. But the God-ascending guests also seemed to vanish from the mountain and sea as if evaporated, leaving no trace. Some saints, disheartened, sought quiet places in the mountain and sea to live in seclusion. Others, yearning for the power of the God-ascending guests, clung to Buyuju and once again went to the primordial immortal realm. Some, during the restoration process, grew accustomed to spending time with Zhang Sheng of the mountain and sea. They transformed into mortals, hiding among Zhang Sheng. The eternal world was no longer a void. Instead, a magnificent and sacred Great Tao Hall stood in the center of the world. The Great Tao Hall was boundless, seemingly a world unto itself. In the infinitely vast space, various Great Taos were arrayed in order. The God-ascending guests surveyed the Great Tao Hall, nodding frequently. The Tao paths of the mountain and sea saints have all been incorporated into it. The current intact state of the mountain and sea should last for 10 billion years. After 10 billion years, Tao annihilation will rise again, and the mountain and sea will shatter anew. Lord Zonming slowly said, as if seeing the dark tide that had been pushed back for a time, beyond the mountain and sea. Zhang Fan then spoke. At that time, I will use change of truth and falsehood to erase the saints. Then, using this great Tao Hall, I will rebuild a batch of mountain and sea saints. This way, another round of mountain and sea restoration can be carried out. Xuanyuan Hong sighed softly. After all, we once promised them. If we force them back again, it will inevitably lead to a struggle. Although it's an easy task, I'm afraid they won't put as much effort into the subsequent mountain and sea restoration as they did the first time. It's better to directly recreate them with true-false Great Tao. The God-ascending guests had no objections, evidently all thinking the same way. Having comprehended true-false Great Tao for countless years, their way of thinking had subtly changed without their realizing it. They themselves might have noticed it at some point, but after taking control of true-false Great Tao, it was indeed difficult for them to view other people and things as equal existences. Moreover, the vast majority of the God-ascending guests' energy was still focused on dealing with the end of the return to God. They didn't care much about other minor details. The true-false Great Tao traces have been nurtured 2/3 of the way. But the further it goes, the slower the evolution speed. It might still need 3 times the time to fully form. No matter, it's just 3 more reincarnations. We have already mastered the origin of the saints, and with the true-false Great Tao, we can create a new batch of saints at any time for restoration. The only thing we need to worry about is the mountain and sea itself. A continuous, boundless image of the mountain and sea instantly appeared before the God-ascending guests. During the restoration of the mountain and sea, the saints' footprints covered every inch of the mountain and sea. The saints were their eyes. As the true creators of the mountain and sea, almost every inch of the mountain and sea was under the control of the God-ascending guests present. The return of the mountain and sea to God is fate. An irresistible fate. Although we have forcefully reversed it, each new birth and destruction will become more and more intense. Even doubling each time, until Tao annihilation appears, and the mountain and sea perishes in an instant. No longer giving us the chance to slowly restore it. So, the time left for us is truly not much. Under the gaze of the God-ascending guests, the image of the mountain and sea underwent multiple transformations. Then, a lonely star hung high, suspended above the mountain and sea. Taoist fan, how are the preparations coming along? The existing great Tao of the mountain and sea is already clear in my mind. I can replace the mountain and sea at any time and ascend to the position of new God. The star formed by the mountain and sea behind the scenes is definitely not my opponent. The only concern is still God. Zhang Fan said indifferently. Therefore, we still need to wait for the birth of the true false great Tao traces. The God-ascending guests nodded slightly upon hearing this. In these years, as Zhang Fan's strength grew deeper, he gradually began to detach from unity of mind and virtue. Even if Zhang Fan intended to share with the God-ascending guests, he, who was getting closer and closer to God, would often inadvertently disappear from the unity of mind and virtue. Therefore, Zhang Fan's words had unfinished parts. Theoretically, the higher the strength and the more sufficient the preparation, the greater the confidence in slaying God should be. But the actual situation was exactly the opposite. Zhang Fan had deduced countless times what would happen to him after destroying the star. But all the results were nothing. No victory, no defeat. As if after completing the destruction of the star, he simply vanished into thin air. Such a bizarre result left Zhang Fan utterly perplexed. Now, he could be said to be the closest existence to God in the entire mountain and sea. Therefore, he understood more and more clearly the power of God. Not enough. A fleeting sense of powerlessness arose in Zhang Fan's heart, though he quickly suppressed it. In these years, he had somewhat understood why his true self had scattered clones back then, seeking a way to break the deadlock. It was simply that he had exhausted everything and gained nothing. But I am different from him. Zhang Fan extinguished all distracting thoughts. What he couldn't achieve, I might be able to. Slaying God. Zhang Fan's gaze swept over the illusory image of the mountain and sea, as if he was witnessing the true mountain and sea. He secretly made up his mind. Just as the God-ascending guests had predicted. After 100 billion years of stability, Tao annihilation struck again. The mountain and sea were broken, and the saints were deeply shaken. Watching this familiar scene, past memories surged like a tide. They wouldn't, would they, drag us back to restore the mountain and sea again? Damn it, this time I'd rather die than comply. HMPH. Although the God-ascending guests are strong, we are not without the power to strike. If they force us again, then. While the saints were still hesitating, Zhang Fan's will had already enveloped the entire mountain and sea. True as false, just a light, airy sentence, without any emotion mixed in. A moment later, the existence of the saints was erased. Not even a ripple was stirred. Taoist fans' comprehension of the true false great Tao is becoming more profound. Lord Zonming praised. The mountain and sea, suddenly deprived of its saints, seemed like a cargo ship that had lost its load. Under the pounding waves of Tao annihilation, it instantly became precarious. It seemed as if it would be swallowed by the wind and clouds in the next moment. False as true, Zhang Fan's indifferent voice echoed through the mountain and sea again. And so, figures, one after another, appeared in various parts of the mountain and sea. Including the primordial immortal realm. Just like before. These artificially created saints seemed to be unaware of anything. Still immersed in their past memories and behaviors. Let's go, we'll just catch them again. Lord Zonming sighed. The old fisherman also lacked his initial excitement, merely following silently. Before long, the mountain and sea restoration project began again. Only Zhang Fan and the God-ascending guests knew that this was already their second time toiling. Mountain and sea, great Tao, true false great Tao. But Zhang Fan, who had completed a magnificent feat, did not feel much effort. He was just comprehending the inexplicable feeling that arose in his heart. Saints, the peak of mountain and sea beings. Yet, he could destroy them with a thought, and shape them with a thought. What about others? Is this God? A strange light flashed in Zhang Fan's eyes. Afterward, Zhang Fan became increasingly taciturn. He seemed to be immersed in secluded cultivation and comprehension, only occasionally reporting general progress to the God-ascending guests. The mountain and sea quickly underwent a second reincarnation. Successful restoration, a period of stability, and then destruction again. This time, the mountain and sea existed completely for 5 billion years. True is false, false is true, the God-ascending guests repeated their actions. A new reincarnation began again. Only this time, their hearts slowly became somewhat numb. No emotions arose, just mechanical repetition. Thus, the mountain and sea underwent one reincarnation after another. And each time, Tao Annihilation's counterattack grew stronger. The final limit, where Tao Annihilation appears and the mountain and sea perishes, as deduced by the God-ascending guests, was approaching. In the eternal void world. It's only a tiny bit short, why can't true false great Tao be nurtured? The God-ascending guests no longer had their usual composure. The true false great Tao traces had been on the verge of birth a long time ago. But for some reason, it seemed stuck, with no further movement. Even after 3 reincarnations of the mountain and sea, there was no progress. This made the God-ascending guests begin to doubt. Could their plan truly succeed? Taoist Fan, how should we decide? Lord Zonming asked. His tone and demeanor even carried a hint of caution. Zhang Fan was not here, but Lord Zonming knew that as long as he mentioned his name, Zhang Fan would know. In these years, Zhang Fan's aura had become increasingly ethereal. Just like the elusive true-false great Tao, both truly existing and yet not manifesting in the world. Unity of mind and virtue had become a mere formality. Zhang Fan's illusory image remained, but they could no longer sense any thoughts from him. A moment later, Zhang Fan's voice resonated in everyone's hearts. We have done everything we can. The true-false great Tao traces have been slow to appear. Although this world is called eternal void and exists independently, it still has some faint connection with the mountain and sea, originating from Jia Yukan. If we truly want to nurture true-false great Tao, we must sever all its connections with the outside world and banish it beyond the mountain and sea. Perhaps there is a glimmer of hope. The God-ascending guests naturally knew what Zhang Fan's words meant. After a moment of silence, as if relieved, let's do our best and leave the rest to fate. We have already done enough. Good, Zhang Fan replied with just one word. The next moment, in the eternal world, the bodies of the God-ascending guests instantly transformed into countless specks of light. Like ashes, they drifted into the air, converging entirely towards a certain point. And then, the entire mountain and sea followed suit. It was as if an invisible great fire had descended, silently burning everything within the mountain and sea. No pain, no sensation. In silent stillness, the mountain and sea perished, beings were annihilated, and the saints ceased to exist. All the ash-like specks of light converged into one place. It was Zhang Fan. He now fully understood his true self's thoughts from back then. Facing the true God while preserving the mountain and sea was purely absurd. Only by returning everything to one, can there be a glimmer of victory. A hint of hesitation flashed in Zhang Fan's heart. To be honest, even now, he had not seen any possibility of defeating the true God. But the arrow was already on the string, and it had to be loosed. The mountain and sea were entirely swallowed by Zhang Fan. The void realm, which received not a single speck of residue, was instantly enraged. Having completely failed the mission assigned by the lonely star, endless waves of Tao annihilation surged towards Zhang Fan. But for some reason, a moment later, the interior of Tao annihilation also became chaotic. It seemed as if the void realm itself was somewhat anticipating this current situation. Zhang Fan naturally knew the reason. Sun Piao Miao, I will help you find liberation. After all, you were once a part of the mountain and sea, indispensable. The voidness of the void realm, compared to true false great Tao, was like a small witch meeting a great one. Wherever his will reached, everything was erased. Or rather, returned to the mortal. With both the mountain and sea and the void realm gone, the stage that had been set collapsed with a roar. The hidden presence behind the scenes then emerged. In just a moment, infinite starlight rained down upon the world. In this familiar scene, Zhang Fan felt boundless rage emanating from above his head. Under the illumination of the starlight, even the true false great Tao trembled. But Zhang Fan merely snorted. A rat who hides his head and shows his tail, dares to contend with me. Facing the scattered starlight, Zhang Fan did not dodge or evade at all. His body expanded infinitely, receiving all the starlight. Within the starlight, he felt countless chaotic and deranged thoughts. And an incalculable number of fragmented images. These images had no practical meaning, only representing the past of the mountain and sea, or rather, this world, in infinite reincarnation. But each one indeed carried the weight of the mountain and sea. Upon contact, it seemed to create a collision. Zhang Fan sat alone, looking up. He felt as if all the stars in the entire universe were falling towards him. If it were Zhang Fan immediately after rebelling against his true self, he would certainly not have been able to withstand such a terrifying invasion. But having undergone multiple reincarnations of the mountain and sea and swallowed everything, he could now calmly endure it all. Just as I said, the so-called lonely star is by no means my opponent. The only concern is God. The stars in the sky gradually dimmed. Zhang Fan silently awaited the arrival of the final moment. 1791. True and False. Chapter 1777. Truth and Falsehood. The moment all starlight was devoured, all sights and sounds from outside vanished. True, pure, dark silence completely enveloped Zhang Fan. Besides Zhang Fan, there was nothing else. Even the concept of time ceased to exist. After a long period of deathly silence, a faint, murmuring sound suddenly echoed in Zhang Fan's ears. Against the backdrop of the extreme quietness, it sounded like a thunderclap. This is. Zhang Fan felt a strange familiarity with the sound but couldn't recall it at once. Although only an instant had passed since all things returned to God, in Zhang Fan's perception, it seemed as if an immeasurably long time had elapsed. Even his memories began to decay and blur. So, he instinctively tried to listen closely. It was like a cicada's sudden chirp, followed by a chorus of thousands. One moment it was a faint murmur, the next it transformed into a grand, majestic symphony. Xuanyuan Hong, Lord Zonming, Old Fisherman. Familiar yet strange names surfaced in Zhang Fan's mind. This caused him to hesitate slightly. Zhang Fan no longer remembered who these people were. But their desperate shouts seemed to be urgently telling Zhang Fan something. Feeling the emotions of these people, Zhang Fan tried to calm his heart nature and block out the other chaotic sounds. However, things did not go as planned. Soon, these familiar voices were drowned out by the ensuing tide. New voices began to appear, both familiar and strange. So familiar that Zhang Fan could blurt out their names, yet strange in that Zhang Fan's mind no longer held any memories of them. Zhang Fan vaguely sensed that something was wrong. Am I decaying? At this moment, Zhang Fan was plunged into immense doubt and confusion. He suddenly remembered his goal. Slaying God. His ambition from years past was still vivid. After he triumphantly devoured mountain and sea and extinguished lonely star, his realm, strength, and heart nature had all reached their peak state. He was fully prepared to contend with the rumored fallen true God. But he never expected, there was no true God. What awaited him was only endless solitude and darkness. An instant became eternal. His body and consciousness began to decay and wither. And the various things he had once devoured, contained within his body, began to revive. All of this was vastly different from what he had envisioned. As if he had been deceived, a surge of malevolence suddenly rose in Zhang Fan's hard nature. Get out! You get out! He was beyond furious, roaring. Yet, even he himself couldn't hear the sound. The dark void realm, unchanging and eternal. Like icy seawater, it silently devoured Zhang Fan. At that moment, Zhang Fan felt the bone-chilling cold contained within the darkness before him. He felt himself suddenly weaken, the soil he relied on for survival rapidly disappearing. He instinctively wanted to gasp for air. But he was utterly unable to reverse this trend. The sounds in his ears grew increasingly dense. Gradually, like dark clouds, they blotted out the sky. Zhang Fan felt as if he were a dying colossal beast. Having lost all strength, he lay on the ground, unable to struggle. Left to the scorching sun, his body decaying, gnawed by flies and insects. I am dying. This realization flashed through his hard nature. Then, immense unwillingness surged within Zhang Fan's hard nature. I have toiled so hard, growing step by step from an ant-like clone to this point. I devoured my true body, consumed mountain and sea, extinguished lonely star. I am almost a god. How could I die so inexplicably? Zhang Fan angrily waved his hand, wanting to drive away the flies and insects circling his body. But his outstretched arm only became a breeding ground for more insects. Not only did it not improve the situation, but it made the surrounding sounds even louder. The sound was like a flood. Despite his myriad unwilling emotions, Zhang Fan felt his existence becoming increasingly tenuous, inexorably drawing closer to death. In a daze, he seemed to hear a horrifying chewing sound. It seemed that in the darkness, a colossal entity was silently devouring him. Compared to those tiny flies and insects, its consumption was slow and elegant. It even seemed to carry a hint of amusement, silently appreciating the downfall of Zhang Fan, this new god. Like being splashed with a basin of ice water in winter, the boundless rage in Zhang Fan's heart nature instantly extinguished. Only fear remained. At this moment, no thought of resisting it could form in his mind. The only thing that remained was the desperate desire to struggle free from its mouth. But its consumption was undeniable, like an inescapable fate. Zhang Fan could only watch, crystal clear, as every inch of his body was gnawed, shredded, and swallowed. Then digested. Everything he had once consumed was lost with this invisible digestion. Ultimately, only Zhang Fan himself remained. The next moment, even Zhang Fan himself was about to be completely devoured. Without the burden of other things, Zhang Fan suddenly felt a surge of hope for life again. He had forgotten many things, almost everything, one could say. But there was one thing he still remembered. Truth. Truth and falsehood. Like a lamp lit in the darkness, though flickering, it briefly illuminated Zhang Fan's lost thoughts. Truth and falsehood, Yao Mark. He vaguely remembered that a world, with truth and falsehood, was being nurtured. It was only a hair's breadth from birth but remained unable to succeed due to its location in mountain and sea. During his process of achieving Tao and becoming a god, he had not swallowed that world into his belly. He had merely allowed it to change. It is still there. As if seeing hope, Zhang Fan's remaining vestiges were thoroughly ignited by a spark. He struggled to open his eyes, trying to find that one possible sanctuary in the boundless darkness. It's there. His memory revived, and Zhang Fan quickly located his target. An eternal world, silently floating. As if it had been there since its birth. Unchanged through the ages. The silent consumption in the darkness, however, regarded him as nothing. As if he had found his last straw, Zhang Fan's remaining divine thought resisted the devouring power from outside and quickly reached that eternal world. It was just a small corner, yet it brought Zhang Fan an unprecedented sense of security. All threats from the outside instantly ceased to exist, and Zhang Fan actually managed to survive. The darkness receded, and time regained its meaning. Zhang Fan became powerful again. After all, he was an existence who had once devoured the entire mountain and sea, and even absorbed Lonely Star. Even just a small remnant was enough to be called powerful. He slowly regained his composure. Everything he had just experienced was like a nightmare. Even now, Zhang Fan still couldn't understand what had happened. But the familiar chi of truth and falsehood emanating from this eternal world brought him waves of reassurance. His reason gradually returned. It actually succeeded in nurturing. This was the first normal thought that surfaced in Zhang Fan's mind. 1792. New ship. Chapter 1778. A new boat. Unbelievable. Pushing the endless strangeness of the outside world to the back of his mind, Zhang Fan carefully comprehended the truth and falsehood before him. Just like looking in a mirror, Zhang Fan observed the truth and falsehood of this world, and it was no different from the open black lens bracket truth and falsehood close black lens bracket he had always controlled. There is no distinction of strength, no difference in hierarchy, no order of before and after. If it is truth and falsehood, then it is truth and falsehood. As if he had seen a peerless treasure, Zhang Fan's divine thought instantly became lost, and it was a long time before he recovered. At the same time, countless doubts and curiosities surged in his heart. If there is no difference between the two truth and falsehoods. Zhang Fan's heart stirred, and he reached out, attempting to bring this nascent truth and falsehood into his grasp. But something he hadn't expected happened. Although he could see truth and falsehood, the nascent truth and falsehood was like a reflection in a mirror to him, untouchable. It is the same truth and falsehood, yet it is not the truth and falsehood I control. After several fruitless attempts, Zhang Fan seemed to understand something and stopped trying to capture it. Instead, he sat down on the spot, attempting to comprehend the nascent supreme Tao of this eternal world from nothing. A moment later, his brows furrowed slightly. Just at the first moment of his attempt, an extremely immense resistance came from within his body, even directly shaking the foundation of his existence. It was indeed possible to comprehend and cultivate the nascent truth and falsehood, but the price was to separate and break from the true-false great Tao he currently controlled. Can the two not coexist? A hint of faint regret flashed through Zhang Fan's heart. Although this was within his expectations, it was still somewhat regrettable. There is a supreme treasure before me, but I can only admire it from afar. Fortunately, he quickly adjusted his mindset and looked towards the outside of the world. In the darkness, he could vaguely sense the massive behemoth that was descending. Although it was formless and intangible, and despite a world separating them, Zhang Fan still felt an unstoppable immense pressure. The divine body has appeared, only lacking truth and falsehood, and it will be the true God descended. Moreover, this true God was conceived from me, or rather, from my decaying body. As his gaze delved deeper into the darkness, the pressure Zhang Fan felt increased exponentially. He had no choice but to shift his gaze. The true God's recovery is already unstoppable. The true-false great Tao within his body gradually stirred. It seemed as if it wanted to leave his body and return to the true God's body, to its rightful place. Zhang Fan sighed in his heart, knowing that this attempt had failed. Taking advantage of the last moments when truth and falsehood could still maintain stability, he analyzed as much as possible the reasons for the current situation. Devouring mountain and sea, destroying lonely star. Everything went smoothly, until the moment after ascending to godhood. Just like those God-ascending guests who had appeared in mountain and sea, Zhang Fan could indeed be called a open black lens bracket God close black lens bracket in this life. But he could not escape the fate of falling. Zhang Fan carefully recalled his experiences at that time. He found the answer just before truth and falsehood completely left his body. It wasn't because the fallen true God reappeared that led to my downfall. Rather, it was because I was gradually decaying and about to fall, which led to the true God being born within my body. My death was the cause, the true God's appearance was the effect. That boundless darkness seems to be able to solidify and corrupt even a God's will. Even with my divine body, I cannot continue to exist. Zhang Fan's mind was turbulent, and the true-false great Tao was about to completely detach. At this last moment, Zhang Fan silently chanted open black lens bracket Huan Zhen close black lens bracket. A point of light illuminated from Zhang Fan's body. Then it shone on the surrounding darkness. At this moment, he seemed to have witnessed the complete body of a god. As if making eye contact with the fallen true God. And then he saw the true God's body, under the illumination of Huan Zhen, melt away like ice and snow, returning to its origin. Mountain and sea reappeared, anchored to year 1. Venerable. Zhang Fan ignored Bai Shuyu's call, and with a single thought of truth and falsehood, his cultivation returned to the saint realm. His figure like lightning, he rushed straight to where Jia Yukin was. He had to confirm whether the nascent truth and falsehood, which had been conceived by exhausting the power of all saints in mountain and sea in the previous life, still existed. This was of utmost importance. The eternal void world created by Jia Yukin was independent of mountain and sea. Without personally engaging with it, even Zhang Fan would find it difficult to perceive its changes. Fortunately, he was familiar with the path and arrived shortly. Truth and falsehood is still there. An indescribable excitement instantly flashed through Zhang Fan's heart. This was currently the second thing, besides himself, that could be preserved under the Huan Zhen reset. If the nascent truth and falsehood were within mountain and sea, I'm afraid it would still be reset by Huan Zhen, just like that divine body. God, and even truth and falsehood itself. None can escape the change of truth and falsehood. However, after this eternal void world conceived the nascent truth and falsehood, it has clearly become completely independent of mountain and sea. The two exist in parallel, without interfering with each other. Its reset will not affect me in the slightest. The faint feeling of being swallowed by darkness and the true God was dispersed by this discovery. This time, Zhang Fan truly saw the hope of breaking the cycle of reincarnation. Who is it? Because of the significant fluctuation in his emotions, Jia Yukin finally discovered Zhang Fan, this unexpected intruder. Ha 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 ha. Zhang Fan didn't answer, only laughed heartily. Jia Yukin was about to make a move when a series of images suddenly flashed through his mind. Fan, fellow Taoist. Driven by instinct, he inexplicably called out this name. They had spent too long together in the previous life, working in unity, so even after the mountain and sea reset, the minds of the God-ascending guests still retained memories of each other. Not long after, the God-ascending guests met again. Within this eternal void world. United in heart and virtue. As Zhang Fan spoke in a deep voice, the saints finally saw the nascent open black lens bracket truth and falsehood close black lens bracket here. No, unbelievable, the Supreme Tao was truly conceived in the world I created. No wonder I felt something was off since this life began, yet I could never pinpoint it. Jia Yukin trembled uncontrollably from extreme excitement. Being able to endure the Huan Zhen reset unchanged. It can basically be confirmed that this world has truly become transcendent and independent. Perhaps it can serve as a boat for salvation. The old fisherman also lost his usual calmness. Amidst the surging emotions, Zhang Fan raised a series of questions. The nascent truth and falsehood can be exempt from the mountain and sea reset. As for the living beings within it, further verification is needed. But first, there is a crucial question. Will the living beings hiding in this world continue to appear in mountain and sea with the Huan Zhen reset? If so, wouldn't there be two existences simultaneously? And if not, wouldn't that mean a lack of God? Zhang Fan's questions completely sobered the God-ascending guests. Besides mountain and sea, another world had actually been born. This was absolutely unprecedented. No one knew the answers to these questions, only practice would reveal the truth. Jia Yukin volunteered, "This time, I will stay here and quietly await the changes before and after Huan Zhen." Zhang Fan pondered and reminded him, "There may be unknown risks." Jia Yukin said indifferently, "Being able to witness the nascent truth and falsehood is enough. Even if I die immediately, I will have no regrets." Zhen Xian then smiled, "Since he isn't afraid, I'll join him." Being able to personally experience the reversal of mountain and sea's fate is not in vain for our cultivation. Zhang Fan nodded and wasted no more time. After leaving this world with the God-ascending guests, he immediately initiated the change of truth and falsehood again. Opening his eyes, he was back in Xuanwang world. To verify what had happened, Zhang Fan rushed without stopping, once again to the eternal void world. "Why are you back?" Jia Yukin, who was sitting cross-legged in the center of the world, was startled at first, and then seemed to realize something, exclaiming, "Has Huan Zhen already been activated once?" Beside him, Zhen Xian also showed a look of joy. 1793, Lights. Zhen Xian and Jia Yukin were still in the same state as they were in the previous life, before mountain and sea was reset. This was enough to show that this eternal void world could indeed exist independently and was not affected by Huan Zhen. "Do we still exist?" Amidst his surprise, Zhen Xian's expression suddenly turned a little strange, and he looked at Zhang Fan and asked. "Within mountain and sea, there are still Zhen Xian and Jia Yukin. However, they are no longer you." Just now, on his way here, Zhang Fan had already sensed two different eternal void worlds within mountain and sea. However, one of them did not have the change of truth and falsehood, it was merely a pure land created by Jia Yukin. The other one was where he was currently. It was a new ark, conceived and born only after countless saints worked together to reconnect mountain and sea several times, enduring endless long eons, and after he continuously sculpted it day and night with his comprehension of truth and falsehood. Zhen Xian's expression was somewhat complex after receiving the answer. "We are now like the items that were bound by Huan Zhen in the past. Independent of mountain and sea, yet unable to see each other. Otherwise, only one of us can remain." Jia Yukin, however, had an indifferent attitude. "I am me, he is not me. Being within the new ark, the lives of others are irrelevant to us. Since the results have been verified, I will go and inform old fishermen and the others. After countless reincarnations, we finally see hope of escaping our fate," Zhang Fan said with deep emotion. "Does this world have a carrying limit? Furthermore, we godhood ascenders are, after all, from mountain and sea. If too many flood in, causing the ark to enter a whirlpool and be doomed," Jia Yukin actually became somewhat anxious, worrying out of thin air. Zhang Fan merely smiled. "We'll know once we try." Before long, old fisherman, Lord Zonming, and the others all arrived. Upon learning of the birth of the new ark, they too were filled with mixed emotions. After countless attempts and always failing to save mountain and sea, perhaps choosing to withdraw and protect themselves was the wiser choice. This eternal world is boundless. It was originally a creation by Jia Yukin, meant to emulate mountain and sea and nurture truth and falsehood. Especially now that it has truly given birth to its own true false great Tao, in a sense, it can be seen as another mountain and sea. The gathering of all godhood ascenders did not cause any burden to it. Eternal calm, with nothingness surrounding. Soon, everyone began discussing the evacuation plan. "Do we want to bring some other people with us?" Xuanyuanhong hesitated a bit, but finally asked. All the Godhood Ascenders looked at Zhang Fan. If the new ark had a navigator, it could only be Zhang Fan. The Godhood Ascenders were actually indifferent. The most important thing was to consider and respect Zhang Fan's opinion. A flash of Bai Shuyu's face appeared in his mind. Zhang Fan pondered for a moment, and finally nodded. You may bring some, as appropriate, regardless of realm. Also, I'm not leaving. At these words, everyone was stunned. However, this world still needs a helmsman. Saying this, a faint figure floated out from Zhang Fan. His face was somewhat similar to Zhang Fan's, but he had no trace of cultivation qi. This was precisely the inspiration Zhang Fan gained from his countless clones of his former, main body. He will take my place and leave with you. As for me, Zhang Fan remained silent, only shaking his head slightly. Taoist Fan, are you worried that once you leave mountain and sea, you might not be able to use Huan Zhen to return to the beginning? Zhen Xian asked upon seeing this. Zhang Fan smiled and said with great confidence, with a single thought of truth and falsehood, no matter where, when, or in what state I originally was. If I activate Huan Zhen while on the new ark, then mountain and sea will disappear into thin air from its original location, and outside the new ark, mountain and sea will reappear. All the Godhood Ascenders looked puzzled upon hearing this. If that's the case, why won't Taoist Fan come with us? There is one matter that still needs to be verified. Don't worry, his presence is like my presence, Zhang Fan said, pointing to his clone. Seeing that Zhang Fan's mind was made up, the Godhood Ascenders no longer pressed him. As he said, they, appropriately, brought some familiar or promising beings and hid them within the new ark. The originally empty and silent world became much livelier with the additions. And with the Godhood Ascenders taking action to transform it, there was no need to worry about survival issues. Zhang Fan observed everything, then his gaze subtly shifted towards his clone. Let's call him, Zhang Xiaofan. He is my clone, born with knowledge of truth and falsehood. Although he currently appears to be just immortal, he, like me, already possesses the ability to reverse and reset with a single thought. The initial anchor point will be the moment the new ark sails away from mountain and sea. I hope they can last a bit longer. A peculiar expression flickered in Zhang Fan's eyes. Although everything was ready, the new ark could not yet leave mountain and sea. Because in everyone's perception, whether it was mountain and sea or the void realm, they were all once part of the true God. Even with the new ark as a vessel now, they could not escape this restriction. Only when mountain and sea is completely submerged, just before the true God revives, will be our chance to escape, Zhang Xiaofan said solemnly, his tone and demeanor almost identical to his main body, Zhang Fan. The Godhood Ascenders nodded, all expressing understanding. They had already experienced countless reincarnations, now it was merely a matter of waiting a bit longer. This time, Zhang Fan once again served as mountain and sea's undertaker. Devouring the rivers and mountains, annihilating the lonely star, approaching the true God. Everything was done with ease. From the initial surge of excitement and shock, to now, only the second time, Zhang Fan was already somewhat numb and skilled. Endless darkness once again enveloped Zhang Fan. It was as if there was nothing else in the world except him. In this instant, time seemed to halt. Or perhaps it flowed at hundreds of billions of times its normal speed. This was a power that could even decay a divine body. Perhaps only the fallen true God could resist it. Zhang Fan, after all, had only devoured the divine body and inherited truth and falsehood. He did not possess the will that a god should have. Thus, he could only watch himself slowly wither and decay in the darkness. But, seemingly sensing the unusual aura on himself, in this instant, Zhang Fan's gaze looked towards a certain spot in the darkness. He faintly sensed that there, a new ark carried his clone and a large number of beings. Compared to Zhang Fan, who was now a god, the new ark was undoubtedly tiny. But for some reason, the existence of the new ark could illuminate the darkness like a candle, expelling the decaying power from the darkness. As expected, Zhang Fan slowly regained his consciousness, attempting to find a way to safely survive in this darkness. However, in the darkness, it was as if a gust of wind suddenly blew. The world's only candle immediately flickered precariously. Zhang Fan vaguely seemed to see the Godhood Ascenders struggling to save it. But in the end, the light still extinguished. Without the illumination of the candle, coldness, deathly silence, and decay once again enveloped Zhang Fan. It seemed he was at the end of his rope, but Zhang Fan did not immediately use Huan Zhen. Instead, he was waiting for something. Sure enough, he was not disappointed. A moment later, a flickering flame reignited in the darkness. That was Zhang Xiaofan's change of truth and falsehood. 1794. God returns. Even those who are about to become true gods find it incredibly difficult to survive in this darkness, let alone that eternal world. It was like a lamp extinguishing, unable to resist in the slightest. Fortunately, Zhang Fan's clone, holding the change of truth and falsehood, could reverse the situation with a single thought, bringing the dead back to life. But that was all he could do. Just like mountain and sea. The new ship, on which the godhood seekers placed high hopes, had just set sail when it fell into the same infinite reincarnation. In fact, its situation was far more brutal than that of mountain and sea. Given mountain and sea's size, each reincarnation could last for hundreds of billions of years. Countless variables, living beings proliferating and evolving. However, the new ship where the godhood seekers were located could only last for a few breaths of time. Each time it returned to the moment it left mountain and sea, and then, like a flickering candle in a strong wind, it teetered precariously. After a moment, it completely extinguished, only to be reset by truth and falsehood, returning to the moment of departure. This cycle repeated over and over. If, in the reincarnation of mountain and sea, the godhood seekers could still lie flat and peacefully due to the hundreds of billions of years of long existence, then on the new ship, they were trapped in a constantly repeating death spiral. No hope, no future. No reincarnation, only infinite. In the cold and silent darkness, there was no concept of time. But from Zhang Fan's perspective, the candlelight had flickered thousands of millions of times. Starting from the millionth flicker, Zhang Fan sensed a faint thought of desire for liberation coming from the clone. But Zhang Fan's answer was no. Being in the darkness, one could not avoid the outcome of decay. Fortunately, the new ship's candlelight flickered continuously, like a warm anchor point, greatly slowing down Zhang Fan's decay process. Don't blame me, this is the only way to try and survive. While struggling in the darkness, such thoughts occasionally flashed through Zhang Fan's mind. Initially, there was some guilt, but soon he became resolute again. To break free from fate, someone must sacrifice. Don't worry, just wait for me, like a true god, to endure this darkness. With the lamp as his guide, Zhang Fan struggled to survive. Slowly, he gained a new understanding of the surrounding darkness. This was the most primitive, most fundamental, and both the initial and final form of the universe. The place where everything was born and where everything perished. Even a true god cannot change this cycle of life and death. He can only maintain his existence with the divine ability of truth and falsehood. If a god is like this, what about others? All living beings in mountain and sea, and even the godhood seekers, are merely evolutions from a part of God's power. Without the protection of truth and falsehood, they naturally cannot last for an instant. Quote, the candlelight, serving as an anchor point, could only delay, not prevent, the trend of decay. Zhang Fan once again smelled the scent of decay on himself. Saints, mountain and sea, godhood seekers, stars. They are all just fleeting visitors on a larger stage, one performing after another, lively indeed. But there will always be a curtain call. The only one who can reappear from extinction is God. Because that is the initial anchor point of truth and falsehood. In his mind, thousands of voices wrestled and sounded together. Zhang Fan, however, no longer had the initial panic. He gazed at the distant lamplight, trying his best to maintain the calmness of his thoughts. Just like anchoring year one for me. No matter what happened in reincarnation, with a single thought, it would return to the predetermined moment. God is indeed the true master of the true-false great Tao. His application of truth and falsehood is superior to mine. There is no need for a thought to activate it. As long as everything perishes and God's demise is met, it can be triggered. Returning to the time when the true God was still present, the initial anchor point. And the true environment of the universe is the absolute foundation upon which the plan will certainly be implemented. Even God himself still needs truth and falsehood to maintain his existence. Everything else born from God naturally cannot escape this fate. No matter what, they will perish within truth and falsehood, welcoming the return of the true God. The true self's repeated Huan Zhen were merely creating small cycles within the grand cycle. Quote. The noisy voices grew louder, making it difficult for Zhang Fan to think steadily. But instinctively, a hint of despair emerged in his heart. He seemed to be facing a dead end. The only way he could think of to escape the reincarnation set by the true God was to invalidate truth and falsehood, and to invalidate the true God's anchor point. But now Zhang Fan already knew that even truth and falsehood itself could not escape the changes of truth and falsehood. He was merely the temporary holder of the true-false great Tao after the true God's demise. How could he rewrite the rules of truth and falsehood? The only thing I can do is Huan Zhen again and again, lingering on, seeking temporary survival. Just like. Zhang Fan looked at the lamplight not far away again. Different paths, same destination, no difference. Hundreds of billions of years, a few breaths of time. At first glance, the two seemed poles apart. But if the number of reincarnations was extended to infinity, then there was no difference between them. They were all just pitiful creatures struggling endlessly. Meaningless. The smell of decay grew stronger, and Zhang Fan's mind was gradually occupied by the increasingly rising cacophony of voices. All right, you may go. He granted his clone, Zhang Xiaofan, the thought of seeking liberation. When the tiny lamplight that had flickered hundreds of millions of times finally extinguished, the destruction Zhang Fan faced became even more rapid. He instinctively wanted to Huan Zhen, but thousands of images appeared in his mind, all of which were experiences he, or his true self, had gone through. Zhang Fan felt a sense of weariness. It's meaningless. Despair, utter nothingness, enveloped Zhang Fan, making him completely ignore the sense of crisis brought by impending demise. He calmly and serenely accepted death. His attention was no longer focused on himself. Instead, he began to ponder the master of truth and falsehood, that former true God. Suddenly, Zhang Fan vaguely felt something was wrong. If everything is predetermined, then why did he go to such great lengths to bring me, an outsider? Zhang Fan was suddenly puzzled. Then he instantly realized, an outsider possesses a characteristic that even God does not have. That is, the ability to maintain one's own changes within an unchanging Huan Zhen. God, like all living beings in mountain and sea, tried to break this infinite reincarnation. That's why I came. His purpose. Zhang Fan instantly thought of many things. He thought of his true self scattering clones, seeking variables. He thought of the fragmented parts in his consciousness and memories. So that's how it is. Zhang Fan should have felt angry. But at this moment, he was unusually calm. To break free from fate, someone must sacrifice. He murmured this sentence again. Previously, he had said it to his clone, Zhang Xiaofan. This time, he said it to himself. Given Zhang Fan's nature, making such a decision was extremely difficult. He had struggled for a long time before his tightly furrowed brows finally relaxed. Then, let's fall back to God's end. At this moment, Zhang Fan was not afraid of death. Because he knew that after his demise, his true self would reappear. The towering decay completely engulfed Zhang Fan. The noisy sounds abruptly ceased. A new God was born. God returned. 1795. End. Chapter 1781. The End. When true God appeared, all decay and noise dissipated. True God revived, standing in the darkness. Everything returned to its original state. Besides true God, there was nothing else. He seemed unsurprised by his return. He merely continued his original mission. He walked with faltering steps through the darkness, seemingly searching for something meticulously. The darkness was too profound, even true God found it extremely difficult to traverse. A long journey, without beginning or end. True God gradually decayed. But true God was indifferent to his impending demise. There was even a hint of anticipation. After true God was completely swallowed by darkness, an unknown amount of time passed. A point of light suddenly brightened, and true God reappeared from nothingness. This was Huan Zhen. The newly awakened true God stood still for a moment, seemingly recalling something. Soon, he noticed something was amiss. Things had not gone as he had expected. And, something was also missing. True God's gaze instinctively turned towards the darkness. But found nothing. Just then, a voice suddenly echoed in true God's hard nature. Are you looking for me? It was Li Fan. The perspective returns to when Zhang Fan ignited the truth and falsehood fire, using Zhen Xian, Jia Yukan, Diao, Lord Zonming, Po Zhen, and Wang Ji as fuel. In the gods, change small world. Li Fan sat cross-legged in the void, observing what Zhang Fan observed and comprehending what Zhang Fan comprehended. Similarly, his left eye was silver gray, and his right eye was pale white. The mountain and sea chart, which was only one stroke away from being completely structured, was instantly perfected. As expected, it's a great tonic. All the godhood seekers are extraordinarily powerful, their insights transcend mountain and sea, allowing them to touch the shadow of true God. Moreover, they can retain a certain degree of memory within the Huan-Zhen reincarnation. If I were to seize it by force, it would inevitably lead to a bitter battle. Unlike now, where they willingly offered everything without much effort. All for that illusory glimmer of hope. HMPH. This is the retribution for being fickle. The main body and the clone simultaneously comprehended the Tao. All things are void, mountain and sea are gone, and true God will return. Li Fan didn't have much time left. In a single instant, hundreds of millions of thoughts flashed, and his silver gray and pale white eyes seemed to pierce through countless reincarnations and endless years. He saw the only possibility of breaking the situation. His gaze retracted, then turned to the Huan-Zhen phantom, which had been quietly floating. In countless past reincarnations, you were the golden finger, entrusted to me. Now, it's time for a change. Li Fan smiled softly. The Huan-Zhen phantom rippled gently. It wasn't a response to Li Fan's words, but rather that the pull of true God's return was growing stronger, making it difficult for even truth and falsehood to maintain its stability. As if speaking to a deaf ear, Li Fan didn't care. If Huan-Zhen had truly developed its own independent consciousness and spoken at this moment, then the plan would have had to change. The so-called Huan-Zhen originates from true God's divine ability. The change of truth and falsehood is the cornerstone of true God's existence. Without the creation of truth and falsehood, even true God would be annihilated in this endless, desolate darkness. But with the change of truth and falsehood, true God can be reborn again and again from destruction. However, Li Fan looked towards the true God, who seemed to be gradually revealing a ferocious appearance in the darkness. Each time true God is reborn, it's not like my Huan-Zhen. Instead, it's similar to a factory reset. The true false great Tao, as the cornerstone of true God's existence, has an overly powerful divine ability. Even truth and falsehood itself, and even true God, cannot escape truth and falsehood. True God, like those mountain and sea godhood seekers, cannot escape the effects of a reset. At most, only some vague memories can remain. Eternal and indestructible, yet also fallen into infinite reincarnation. True God wished to break the situation and escape fate. Hence, my arrival as an outsider, and this was the beginning of everything. Fortunately, it wasn't me who initially endured the endless torment of reincarnation. It was the former him, the so-called Shan Fan. Although Shan Fan was captured, he was trapped in mountain and sea. Unaware of the reason, he only saw the apocalyptic scene of mountain and sea's demise. Thus, driven by his instinctive hard nature, he sought to save the world. Thinking of this, Li Fan snorted coldly. And he actually succeeded step by step. He held the divine blessing, comprehended truth and falsehood, and created Huan-Zhen. He turned the tide, propping up a collapsing edifice. Unfortunately, after painstakingly repelling Tao annihilation and saving mountain and sea, he only then discovered the truth behind the scenes. The conflict between mountain and sea and Tao annihilation was merely a play staged by the true mountain and sea for the sake of becoming a god. This is everything I previously deduced Shan Fan had experienced. But it's not everything. A single thought of Huan-Zhen can reset mountain and sea. Shan Fan's comprehension of truth and falsehood had reached its limit. Mountain and sea was definitely not his opponent. There's one last piece of the past, not in my mind, but hidden within. Huan-Zhen. Before comprehending truth and falsehood, I was I, and Huan-Zhen was Huan-Zhen. But after comprehending truth and falsehood, Huan-Zhen is me, and I am Huan-Zhen. Li Fan reached out, attempting to touch the Huan-Zhen phantom. The previously constantly rippling figure suddenly seemed to have support, stabilizing for a moment. It was even more like snow melting into water, merging with Li Fan. Truth and falsehood originally belonged to true God. But at this moment, after I comprehended truth and falsehood, I can perfectly merge with it. This is because Shan Fan was once true God. As his gaze flickered, Li Fan had already made his decision. However, I still need to make one final arrangement. Li Fan looked down at Zhang Fan, who was about to awaken from his comprehension and charged towards him, a playful smile on his face. With a gentle G, a body almost identical to Li Fan's appeared out of thin air. His eyes ignored Li Fan, only staring at Zhang Fan below, quietly awaiting his arrival. Let you be the main body then, Li Fan thought to himself. Then, no longer resisting, he softly chanted the Zhen Yan that had always been engraved on the Huan-Zhen panel. When true is false, false is true. His figure, along with the Huan Zhen figure, simultaneously faded. Finally, they vanished. Before his consciousness was swallowed by darkness, he vaguely heard the main body's scolding voice. Still not returning. After that, Li Fan seemed to lose his independent thoughts. He operated like a machine, transforming into the true-false Great Tao, silently watching Zhang Fan's struggle. At the same time, he fulfilled the duties that Huan Zhen should have. Until this moment, Zhang Fan died, falling into the end of Gui Shen. True God revived, decayed, and then perished. Everything returned to the initial anchor point. It was not Li Fan's initial anchor point, but True God's initial anchor point. However, unlike countless past reincarnations, in addition to True God himself, there was another consciousness, transformed into truth and falsehood, existing at this moment. True God did not feel the anger of being deceived. He merely silently felt the already mutated true-false Great Tao within him, as if making eye contact with Li Fan. Li Fan was also unafraid. There was a natural boundary and chasm between True God and mortals. Even if their eyes met, even if Li Fan had now transformed into Huan Zhen, becoming True God's golden finger, he still could not understand what True God was thinking at this moment. He only knew that Shan Fan had also reached this point. From now on, it would be a reversal of roles, replacing True God. After transforming into Huan Zhen and returning to the initial anchor point, escaping the reincarnation scheme set by True God, replacing True God was no longer out of reach, but truly feasible. He had no worries about the surrounding darkness. True God would naturally resist it. And what Li Fan had to do next was, step by step, take True God for himself. At this moment, Li Fan finally understood why Shan Fan, having already reached this point, would still give up. I have now transformed into Huan Zhen, and I am already in an invincible position. Afterwards, I only need to do similar things, occupying and assimilating everything True God possesses. When I return from decay again, True God will be gone, and only I will exist. It's just that, assimilating everything of True God means completely devouring all the familiar people, things, objects, and Taos in the mountain and sea derived by True God. From Bai Shuyu, Ko Hong, Dao Xuanzi, Xiao Heng, Zhang Haobo, He Zhenghao, Su Bai, Chuan Fa, Heavenly Doctor, Shou Chu, Lianshan, Guihai, Tai, Old Fisherman, Lord Zonming, Xuanyuan Hong. Great Zon Small World, Xuanwang World, Original, Other Shore, Mountain and Sea, Void Realm. All those assimilated by me, when the mountain and sea reincarnation restarts, they will no longer exist. They will have completely disappeared. Although there may still be people with the same names, they are no longer themselves. They are merely one of my incarnations. Killing Zhang Sheng to achieve one's own success. No wonder Shan Fan didn't do it. But, he wouldn't, but I will. Li Fan's resolve was firm, as cold as iron. This was destined to be an incredibly long path. In each reincarnation, he could only assimilate one person, one Tao, or one object. But once assimilated and transformed by Li Fan, it no longer belonged to True God. Instead, it belonged entirely to Li Fan. Even returning to True God's initial anchor point, it would be the same. Like ants moving house, even if mountain and sea were vast and endless, there would eventually be a day when it was hollowed out. And with the initial anchor point here, even if True God wished to commit suicide, he could not. Even if he chose mutual destruction, he would still return to the predetermined moment. True God appeared unharmed, but internally, his color had quietly changed. Then, let the reincarnation begin once more. Li Fan's will and True God's will collided with a roar. The newly born True God once again faced division. Mountain and sea gradually rose, and reincarnation reappeared. Fener. When Bai Shuyu's familiar voice echoed in his ears again, Li Fan opened his eyes. Meeting Li Fan's gaze, Bai Shuyu was slightly startled, instinctively retreating repeatedly in fright. Fener, how could you? Li Fan's expression was as usual. "And, my salvation begins with you." Bai Shuyu's body instantly stiffened. When true is false, false is true. The ghostly voice lingered endlessly. Li Fan's body completely faded within mountain and sea. What remained was only an existence named Bai Shuyu, but in reality, it was Li Fan. I transform into Huan Zhen, I transform into Shuyu, I transform into all things. In reality, there is no difference. Bai Shuyu looked out at mountain and sea beyond Xuanwang World, took a step, and began Li Fan's God-devouring reincarnation. The demise of true God was unstoppable. But when true God reappeared from destruction, things had already changed. Besides truth and falsehood, there was another point within true God's body that was stained with Li Fan's color. Although this point was so insignificant compared to true God, it nevertheless heralded a certain inevitable end for true God. Reincarnation restarted. In the endless and profound darkness, true God was born and then perished. Just like a constantly lighting and extinguishing lamp. Even if each illumination lasted for hundreds of billions of years, if the time scale was continuously extended, then this immeasurable amount of time would pass in an instant. When mountain and sea once again reached the end of Gui Shen, the entire mountain and sea fell into an extremely bizarre situation. Facing a great catastrophe, all living beings and all Taos showed no fear. Instead, they all fell into a kind of confusion. Then the confusion gradually faded, turning into fanaticism. Endless living beings, all Taos, all shouted in unison, passionately, "It's time! It's time!" The calamity did not cease, and all things returned to true God. However, this time, the true God who returned had a new identity. Li Fan. Too long had passed since the first God-devouring reincarnation. So long that Li Fan, who had achieved his ultimate goal and successfully replaced true God, stood in a daze for a long time. Only then did he recall the past. His heart nature was devoid of joy or sorrow, exceptionally calm. As this, true God, the moment he became a god, his vision was vastly different from before. As if he had adapted, it was no longer completely pitch black, but he could vaguely see his surroundings. Even if the darkness dissipated slightly, there was no other existence in the entire world except him. Empty and boundless. After accomplishing all his goals, Li Fan, ironically, didn't know what to do next. Possessing the change of truth and falsehood, his will could even transcend the change of truth and falsehood. This allowed Li Fan to even ignore the threat of the profound and the decay of his divine body. He could exist forever, but he would also exist alone. No one to accompany him, nothing to say. He merely stood in the darkness, wandering aimlessly. Is this the immortality I have been pursuing all this time? Li Fan remained silent. Time continued to flow quietly. In the darkness, the lamp representing Li Fan had lit up and extinguished an unknown number of trillions of times. Finally, Li Fan couldn't bear it anymore. How boring. After a long sigh, Li Fan gazed ahead. After a long while, he finally made a decision. With a single thought, the mountain and sea, which had disappeared for a very, very long time, finally reappeared. Only this time, it was not the same as the mountain and sea of the past. There was no longer the worry of falling into infinite reincarnation, thus no disturbance from the void realm Tao annihilation. Every reincarnation Li Fan had experienced was reshaped by him. However, in all the mountain and sea, Li Fan's figure was absent. Thus, in the Tianquan mirror, the heavenly doctor clone looked at the empty space in front of him, at a loss. Outside Xuanwang world, the heavenly doctor's main body, who was speeding wildly, also stopped in a daze. He was stunned, then found that he couldn't remember why he had tried so hard to return to Xuanwang world. He seemed to have forgotten something extremely important. The heavenly doctor in a black robe looked at his empty hands, a hint of confusion flashing in his eyes. Looking back at the long trail of destructive marks he had caused, his brows furrowed even tighter. With a single thought, he swept across the dark star sea. His divine thought paused slightly when it passed by the true immortal comprehending the Tao in the immortal ruins. A hint of hesitation appeared, then he reached out and lifted the skeletal hungry immortal. Flying beyond the high wall, passing through the long, blank passage. Upon looking up at the end, the heavenly doctor's body suddenly stiffened, and the hand holding the hungry immortal involuntarily loosened. He stood frozen in place. When he came, there was clearly Tao annihilation everywhere, but for some unknown reason, it was no longer there. The various sages of mountain and sea, who were still frantically searching for Huan Zhen, suddenly felt a slight confusion. After a moment of recovery, they were all astonished. Where is the Xuanpin Great Tao? How did it disappear without a trace? Only Xingfu, a strange look floated in his eyes. He lowered his head and frowned, repeatedly pondering in confusion. Huan Zhen. What is Huan Zhen? It wasn't just mountain and sea. Li Fan also created exclusive playgrounds for the void realm Tao annihilation and the stars. Separated from mountain and sea, invisible to each other. The stars were like the newborn dawn, piercing the darkness. A ray of starlight reappeared, shining upon the world. But the starlight only lasted for a moment, then it seemed to sense Li Fan's gaze. The brilliance suddenly dimmed, too frightened to reveal itself in the slightest. Ha 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 ha, interesting, interesting. His long dormant hard nature finally revived. Li Fan felt a joy he hadn't experienced in a long time. As the saying goes, to gain wealth and not return home is like wearing brocade in the dark, who would know it? Becoming a god alone, how boring. I want my name to be spread across this vast sea. Although with his current status and cultivation, he could change and create with a single thought. But that would be so uninteresting, he wanted to do it himself. Li Fan clasped his hands behind his back, proud and self-satisfied, and slowly entered the new mountain and sea. At that instant, Li Fan suddenly froze. He looked at the mountain and sea before him, full of life and free from the danger of destruction, and at the familiar faces within mountain and sea. The figure of Shan Fan suddenly flashed before his eyes. A realization dawned in his heart nature. I schemed against Zhang Fan, but Shan Fan would not scheme against me. Because he knew that if I succeeded, with my hard nature, I would definitely not be able to endure the endless torment of darkness. Whether for amusement or out of extreme boredom, I would eventually recreate this mountain and sea. This is perhaps the last tenderness he left for this mountain and sea. The end of the book. 1796. Final remarks. Completion remarks. From the book's release on March 21, 2022, to its completion on August 7, 2025. 3 years and 5 months, 4,884,000 words, my first book. The journey has been incredibly long. How many 3-year periods does one have in life? Many things happened in those 3 years. Leaving aside life's various events, just focusing on this book, it also went through many twists and turns. The early stage had mediocre results, the middle stage gradually improved, and the late stage fell into a predicament. Ever since Li Fan jumped out of the original possibility, it became increasingly difficult to write. It can be said that every day was extremely challenging, and he felt like he was sitting on pins and needles in front of the computer desk. The fundamental reason was that everything meticulously laid out and described in the early stage became useless. And the transcendence and saint realm were truly too abstract, making them unable to be described with the same detail as the lower realm periods. It was like chewing wax, readers weren't enjoying it, and I wasn't enjoying writing it myself. Coupled with health reasons, writing a few thousand words every day was torture. Although there were many bright spots, they couldn't reverse the overall situation. So, some readers started criticizing me for dragging out the ending, saying I was just trying to make money. That was truly unfair. When I started writing, the ending I envisioned was Li Fan's single thought recreating the mountain and sea, with everything he had experienced reappearing. I also left foreshadowing that would echo the end of the last chapter. It can be said that Li Fan was always moving towards this goal. True Immortal, Transcendence, and Saint were all unable to meet this requirement. Li Fan could only keep moving upward. This was dictated by rationality. If I were to force the book to end, I certainly could. After breaking out of the high wall, everything could be concluded in 10 chapters. But how would that be any different from a rushed ending? One must consider the completeness of the book. A story with a clear beginning and end is definitely better than one that stops abruptly in the middle. I am quite satisfied with the current ending. Of course, only the ending. It is undeniable that the latter half of the book did have problems. This might also be a common mistake in long-form serialized web novels, and for a newcomer's first book. For the next book, I will focus on a single world, and the highest realm will no longer be as heaven-defying and conceptual as Huan Zhen. So, that's that. Thank you to all the readers who have accompanied me throughout this journey. Thank you to the operations managers like Yahuo and Yunyang for their continuous support. See you in the next book. P.S. Currently, subscribing to Chongsheng Lu in its entirety gives you a God's Light status. Your support would be greatly appreciated.